Chapter 241. What? Our spiritual energy is being passively drained, and both physical strength and vitality are dropping at a rate of 1% per minute. The eyes of those present slightly shifted. It's really happening, but why wasn't there any notification just now? The power of paradise has disappeared, and now the bodily attribute panel, as well as the digitization, is also gradually fading. Su Chi paused, looking towards the top club players. I think you understand what I mean. Their expressions turned extremely grave as they checked their own attribute panels. These powers, inherent to the players themselves, ensured that all players could use digitization and skills and tools even without system intervention. Once gone, the good news was they could immerse themselves in the game more. The bad news was real death loomed over them. Let's go. Move faster. The ghost-faced magician and others' faces drastically changed, promptly responding without any hesitation, and many players gritted their teeth, intending to rush forward. The dark red eerie glow brought distortion, terror, as if spectral whispers were generating all sorts of strange illusions, bursting out around the energy. This also simultaneously presented an extremely tricky situation. As everyone gritted their teeth and walked, they suddenly felt the ground fiercely split open. Many screamed in fear, jumping to the sides, while the ones who accidentally fell plunged into the abyss. But in reality, when everyone snapped back to their senses, they were horrified to find no cracks had appeared. It was purely an illusion. Those who fell into the abyss all lay on the ground, either unconscious or completely silent. Those lagging behind also caused a decrease in the number of people resisting the impact, adding just that bit more pressure on each individual. Ethan Dawn, wiping sweat, said, "This mess, should we really be helping? Just being nearby is already so difficult. Do you have a better idea?" Su Chi, looking at the deep red exclamation mark of the destruction countdown, said, "Now I'm even more certain. To solve all this, the source is in that pit." And at that moment, their eyes once again showed a hint of terror. Careful! They all saw over a dozen hyenas, with sharp fangs and bodies pierced by various spikes, charging at them. Luckily, Zero and the others didn't hesitate and directly killed these death hyenas with weapons without bursting their spiritual energy. Su Chi narrowed his eyes, looking towards the pit. The twisted eerie. The illusions bursting out seemed to be events that had happened in this city before, including the hyenas they themselves had encountered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Su Chi gently began, "from now on, follow my command." The massive energy erupting from the central pit, and the impacts generated were unconsciously rippling, just the tip of the iceberg, yet it had already plunged the players into a dire situation. There was no room for discussion. Those who chase me most vigorously stand at the very front. The rest arrange themselves in a V formation behind, in case of an emergency. Protect yourselves first, then help others. So many players gathered here could resist 2 to 3 7th-rank monsters together. But in reality at this moment, facing the aftermath of the energy impact, the players could only manage to share a minuscule part together. If too many fell, they might as well just remake. There is no remake option, so never mind. You, Penelope Bloom looked at Su Chi. If you're going to command, you might as well step back, and we can protect you. Me, Su Chi, Brother Chun and I will lead. Ethan Dawn, biting his teeth as he walked, heard this guy and suddenly looked up. What does this have to do with me? Don't be modest, your investigative ability is very special and useful, Su Chi gently said. So I have a very important task for you next. Ethan Dawn's mood fluctuated, blankly asking, "What task?" 20 seconds later, Ethan Dawn looked at the huge rattle drum in his hand, his eyelids twitching. This is that face monster's rattle drum from before, right? It seems a bit similar. What do you mean a bit? This is clearly it. Ethan Dawn's eyes widened, now filled with many questions. Wasn't it handed over to Final Home? How is it in your hands? It's not important. Su Chi whispered gently. The most important thing right now is this moment. You stand beside me, And when something sinister descends later, you strike it hard. This thing also carried a spiritual impact similar to the old monster with a human face, originating from the same pollution. Without the ability to use spiritual energy, it proved to be much more useful. Ethan Dawn took a deep breath and said, "I get it, but isn't this something anyone could do? What does this have to do with my abilities?" He actually thought his abilities would come in handy. The road ahead was only a kilometer long, but the various twisted and eerie encounters arrived wave after wave. Disasters, misfortunes, bloodshed, and even sharp icicles from the sky. There was also a rich variety of monsters. With difficult steps under the residual impacts and Suchi's commands, everyone moved forward step by step as if crossing a chasm. Everything before their eyes was genuinely bizarre power. No one dared to take it lightly. Time is running out. Suchi kept an eye on the deep red exclamation mark, which now included a countdown unlike before, constantly reminding him of all the changes. And now, everyone had finally reached the edge of the abyss. Each person trembled, an overwhelming sense of terror overloading them, their heartbeats audibly frantic. Yet they couldn't help looking curiously into the pit. What is actually down there? Who is that terrifying presence? At that moment, for some reason, everyone wasn't restricted by the untouchable and insurmountable limits. They could clearly see a person sitting in the pit, wearing a yellow robe, gaunt as if dead, with only the horrific energy being sucked out of him visible. He understood why everyone could look directly. Everyone had been marked when they reacted. Each person could earn the right for direct contact, but at the same time, if they were unable to assist, this mark might backlash. Encountering a ruthless master, they could be cursed to the most terrifying places, facing endless bizarre tribulations. It seems that perhaps due to the mark being blocked, I'm consequently unpopular. After all, his constitution was complex. And at that moment, the yellow-robed corpse sitting in the middle actually moved, slowly raising its head. Its face and robe seemed fused together, with no features visible, but its voice was faint and hoarse as it came through. "Help! Help me!" Everyone was utterly silent. The previous offer of help was merely a polite response in absence. And now, although everyone could look directly and see that it was merely a corpse, a profound oppressive feeling originated from within, giving everyone a chilling sensation. No one dared to respond lightly. Suchi, however, didn't have that concern. He found that after integrating the evil god's eye, his resistance to various so-called oppressive feelings was quite high. As long as it wasn't causing direct damage, he wouldn't have a problem. He pulled out a megaphone. "Comrade below, don't panic. I can help you. Everyone." But the other party silently looked at him with that black hollow face. Although everyone had the mark and the right to contact, when the other's gaze fell upon them, everyone's bodies stiffened and trembled. The presence of a truly superior being, even if just a corpse, was still too much for the weak to bear. The other side was silent for over 10 seconds, seemingly conflicted and puzzled. Eventually, it finally expressed its request. Ancient whisper. Chant. Its voice faint and hoarse, it continued. Recovery. Anxious land. Temple. Chapter 242 Swindler Priest. 3 surnames servant. Its hoarse voice reached everyone's ears, ghostly and haunting. But it seemed it hadn't spoken in a long time, and its fragmented sentences did not make sense to the crowd. It seemed to realize this as well. Then, a mark on everyone slowly began to flicker, and each person was slightly startled. "What's wrong?" Suchi paused slightly. Ethan Dawn murmured, "There's a voice in my head. It's communicating with us." As the only person not marked, Suchi raised an eyebrow. Was he excluded again? He looked towards the figure in a yellow robe at the center. Although he could see the information above its head, the refresh timing was constant and the information random. He had to watch it in segments. It is seeking help. It wants to break this vast ceremony. It was once one of the evil god's priests. The last line caused Su Chi's eyes to twitch slightly. Wait, what had he seen? The evil god? Ominous. Or rather, endearing. It's just that. Su Chi's eyes drilled into the existence clad in the yellow robe. This guy wasn't the yellow-robed master. But why was there a connection with the evil god? And the word priest meant it had served the evil god. It was known that the strongest being under a deity was generally called a bishop. A deity usually has fewer than 10 bishops, divided into archbishops and ordinary bishops, who preside over the realms in place of the divinity. Next in line were the priests. Priests were the bishop's right hand, maintaining faith in the divinity, managing the realms, also often appearing in public and holding a very high position. Those priests who followed the archbishop were also known as great priests. Broken down, their status was that of the highest in their class. This guy is actually a priest, but there was more. Other information refreshed on the display. It was once one of God Gerba's priests. Really now? You have a second profession? Thereupon, now it is one of the yellow-robed master's priests. Su Chi fell silent. He couldn't easily comment on this person's complexity. He could only describe it in 4 words. That is, a 3 surnames servant. The information was somewhat overwhelming. This guy wasn't the yellow-robed master. All the aura, strength, and the sequence of twisted transmissions, although not illusions, were clearly achieved through other means. At this moment, the players trembled slightly and slowly came back to their senses. Their eyes filled with disbelief and excitement. Why do you all look like you've seen something racy? Starved for it. What did that guy say? Su Chi asked. How dare you refer to the great being before us as that guy? Ethan Dawn's tone was somewhat excited. This entity is a genuine divine. Su Chi, unfazed, said, Go on, I'm listening. Ethan Dawn, still thrilled, began to recount what he had just heard. All of us just now received its reply through the mark. It's a great divine, an extraordinary being, but now it's sealed here. If we can help this great being communicate with the temple, it can break free from this vast ceremony, and we will not only be without worries, but we can also become its followers and gain unimaginable benefits. This was the first time the players had encountered such a terrifying, high-ranking entity, and they were naturally extremely excited. Because in paradise, many people had already pledged to the religions and powers of the 10,000 realms. Starting typically from the lowest level of believers, it was almost impossible for minor figures to have real contact with a divine being. At most, they would circle the shrine, holding hands and singing prayers. But now, the divine was right in front of them. How could they not be excited? Su Chi. Why does this pitch sound so familiar? Am I Emperor Qin Shi Huang? Give me 2,000, and I'll make you the National Guardian General? So, what are you guys going to do next? Penelope Bloom's eyes also sparkled with excitement as she spoke gravely. Naturally, we're going to break all of this ceremony in front of us and then help it escape from its binds. Su Chi couldn't easily make a judgment. But from what he could tell, his and this guy's goals were the same. They both wanted to break the ceremony. The ceremony covered vast areas of land and was also the true fuse to the impending destruction. Su Chi didn't believe he alone could stop its progress. After all, from the dangerous zone all the way here, hundreds of 7th-rank monsters were maintaining the ceremony, and the city had more dangerous beings guarding it. Unless he summoned the evil god. But Su Chi wouldn't resort to that move until it was absolutely necessary. In any case, Su Chi didn't stop the players' actions. Divine being, Lord, Great Master. The players knelt on one knee in a sacred circle like pilgrims, solemn and thrilled. A mark flickered above each of them, ancient whispers emerging through these marks into their minds, spoken by their mouths. As they continued to recite, it became incomprehensible. The language was obscure, the pronunciation strange, filled with oddity. The people also fell into a stupor, eyes closed, lips moving incessantly as if entranced. And Su Chi, watching this scene, was the only one not participating, since he didn't have the mark. It seems to be some kind of ceremony related to the anxious land mentioned by it. The Temple, Chapter 243. I've mentioned before that if believers want to fulfill their wishes through praying to a shrine or totem, they would perform their prayers and chant like this. It has nothing to do with the strength of the believers, the number of people, the degree of faith, the offerings. These conditions often have to be satisfied to have a chance of receiving a response. But it's not a divine entity, it just gathers believers, invokes the authority of priests, praying, strength. I just hope it's not the evil god brother. The players, guided by the mark, gathered around and chanted. Meanwhile, the person in the yellow robe silently watched Su Qi, who also silently watched it. Their eyes met. In silence, it slowly activated the aura of its yellow robe, thinking it could intimidate this person. But to its surprise, Su Qi's gaze did not shift away, but rather, he stared back at it. As time updated, question marks would continuously reveal more miscellaneous information. The longer he waited, the more he saw, and even if the information was fragmented, Su Qi had the ability to piece it together. You don't seem to be a divine entity. Su Qi spoke softly. It was unable to communicate through the mark and could only use a throat that sounded rusty from countless years, uttering a strained and hoarse voice. You are who? It was not that it couldn't speak, but it seemed as if it hadn't made a sound for a very long time, or perhaps this body had decayed long ago, requiring time to recover. That question is too broad. I could be a speck of dust in the universe, or the sect hierarch of the Hustlers sect. I could be my mother's son, or my grandfather's grandson. The yellow-robed person was taken aback. It was merely asking with a hint of caution and confusion, but the series of answers thrown at it was overwhelming. Anyway, when you ask who I am, Su Qi looked at it. You might as well start by telling me who you are. The yellow-robed person remained silent. It could see that Su Qi's strength was very weak, at least in its eyes. Although not a divine being, as a priest it still possessed terrible strength. Of course, it was just that it had been asleep for too long, and now was not only suppressed but also very frail. It struggled to extend its withered arm, and a mark slowly floated over. Su Qi did not rashly reach for the mark until a few pieces of information from the question mark indicated that there was no other danger. Then he reached out his hand. Upon contact, a voice slowly rose, deep and ethereal. Weak mortal, who on earth are you? Why are you unaffected by the influence of mighty powers? As I've said, ask for someone's name before you reveal your own. The more information Su Qi saw, the more he understood about the entity before him, and the better he knew its weaknesses. The yellow robe it wore was a divine artifact, endowed with the majesty of the yellow-robed master. It was amazed at itself, because when it activated the power of the yellow robe just now, for some reason, the yellow robe did not envelop me and even actively avoided me. It said in a deep voice, I am naturally the supreme, divine being. Su Qi cut it off. Divine beings have an intimidating presence that is unapproachable, unspeakable, and unheard of for the weak. Except for when I first entered the city, I felt this way, but as soon as I stepped into the pit just now, nothing happened. He looked at the people. At first, I thought they could touch it because the mark qualified them to contact the divine being, but now it seems the mark was just for your communication with them. What Su Qi said was based on experience. The evil god is the most typical example. Its projections always caused an uproar. And although the Master of Destruction is also a terrifying divine entity, on the 2 occasions she appeared, it was in a weakened spiritual body, possessing only extraordinary traits and not the stature of a divine being. The girl's physical strength seemed very powerful at the time, but it was actually somewhat lacking compared to her priests. It was in the normal sequence and nowhere near a sliver of her true strength. As for the Master of Destruction's true complete form, I anticipate the terror it brings, the unrivaled power, the suppression, are no weaker than the effects of the previously mentioned yellow-robed master. At this moment, The yellow-robed person fell into silence. It was puzzled. Why wasn't this fellow affected? That was the power unleashed by the divine artifacts on its person. The true might of a divine. Mortal, it uttered somberly. This isn't something you should be prying into. Even though I am not a divine, the position and strength I hold are beyond your imagination. Su Qi gestured around him, reminding, but evidently, you are sealed here and even need us, mere mortals, to aid you. And please note one thing, they are considered my people as I brought them here. Round up, they are my underlings. In that light, they are striving to assist you. As their boss and spokesperson, I naturally assume responsibility for them, so, you're Excellus, wouldn't it be reasonable to be a bit more sincere? Even though the exclamation mark was centered here in deep crimson, he had already discerned the source. It was the grand ritual, the staggering energy originating from this place, which must have a reason. And these things he could hardly fathom through mere information fragments to get the complete content. He could only learn through the person before him. The yellow-robed master remained silent, having previously deemed these mortals as mere tools. After all, by breaking the ritual, they too could survive. Unexpectedly, this insignificant mortal now required it to be a bit more sincere. How audacious! What is my identity? And what is yours? Of course, if it truly comes to that, Su Qi shook his head with a sigh. I can only let my underlings give up assisting. As for these so-called ancient whispers, you might want to look for someone else, though it might be too late. The yellow-robed master? It said solemnly, just as I informed them, this world is collapsing. This massive ritual seeks to destroy everything. Your wish to survive as mortals and my desire to escape, in the end, all lead to breaking the ritual. Su Qi replied, I understand this much, but you should be able to see it. We might pay a certain price, but every person here has hidden traits enabling them to leave this place. The yellow-robed master frowned tightly, scrutinizing everyone. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if seeing something unbelievable. Old days! Su Qi's eyelids twitched. His previous words naturally referred to the power of paradise, which in the present world should no longer be a secret, the mechanism within each player's being seen as lineage, extraordinary traits, similar powers to a lineage's divine abilities by other high beings. But he didn't expect the yellow-robed master to utter the term old days. Although clearly some information wasn't revealed, it was enough. This term was taboo and ancient. He also learned from various ancient high beings that it was no simple matter. Something that even those beings feared, and which was currently beyond his reach. Clearly, the yellow-robed master was unwilling to say more. It began to speak slowly. Since it is so, mortal, listen well. Su Qi silently observed it. Must it present itself with such flourish? I am the magnificent, the sacred, revered by countless, feared by countless, a divine, the yellow-robed master. It declared with gravity, one of its priests. That build-up sure came with the air of a lackey. No wonder it could play the three surnames servant. What a coincidence! Su Qi introduced himself with a smile. I am also magnificent, sacred, revered by countless, feared by countless, the sect hierarch of the Hustlers sect. Su Buxian, the yellow-robed master. Never heard of it. You, such an insignificant mortal, can also be a sect hierarch. It seems this is but a small-time organization of no repute. Its tone had become much more normal at the moment, no longer as solemn and unemotional as before. Judging from your weak fellows. Indeed, it has fallen. Su Qi paused slightly. It was clear this being, just like the countless ancient warriors slumbering on the ancient battlefield, had lived for a very long time. Its mention of decline, was it referring to its own era that paradise once existed there too? Chapter 244. Burst. New attribute. Darkness. Time ticked away second by second. The ancient whispers muttered by the players had generated a miraculous effect, bursting forth with a radiant aura from the divine artifacts on the yellow-robed priest. Here it comes. The yellow-robed priest's expression grew solemn. The entire black fog vortex surprisingly revealed an aurora. A projection was thunderously descending. In the sky dome above, layer upon layer of enormous, majestic structures became visible. What is this? The temple's projection from the anxious land. Today is the day of audience for the anxious land, the time when the temple's power is recovering. The yellow-robed priest spoke. At this moment his garment exuding a terrifying aura, worn and aged. But the yellow robe danced ethereally, connecting to the projection of the temple in the sky dome. I thought you'd summon the actual yellow-robed master. Impossible. Such a thing could never happen. The yellow-robed priest ground out hoarsely. All the divines are slumbering. Not a single one's projection can descend into the present world. Next, we'll see if the temple's projected power can break through this damn ritual. The power of the projection and the prayers of the faithful. Even though mediated by the yellow robe, it wasn't certain it could destroy the ritual. At this moment, the power bursting forth from the temple's projection collided with the massive ritual. Boom! In that instant, Su Qi could clearly feel the entire city, even the entire hazardous area, the whole world, tremble. At this point, the players had also completed their mission. Stepping out of their trance, eyes dry and tongues parched as they opened their eyes to look towards the sky dome, their hearts profoundly shaken. Damn! Ethan Dawn was shaking Su Qi's shoulders, his face flushed. Su Buxian, boss, look. It's a miracle. We've actually prayed for such power. Many were nearly overwhelmed to the point of kneeling before the yellow-robed priest once again. The top clubs were also incredibly moved. The reason for so much division within Paradise was because everyone was frantically pursuing truly great power, and now they had the fortune to witness this scene. They couldn't help but be excited. Su Qi slowly gazed at the sky dome. This scene truly grandiose, the temple's projection and the vortex of darkness. The burst of brilliance caused the entire polluted world to shudder. At this moment, boom! The ritual outside had a horrifying aura spreading. A tumultuous roar suddenly thundered, shaking the sky. Everyone felt dizzy, nearly vomiting blood from the reverberations. Su Qi mentally resisted the impact, suffering no significant effect. His gaze shifted to several enormous figures outside the ritual, each brimming with tremendous abnormality, unleashing power in an attempt to assault the central area. What's this? The guardians of the ritual. 5 sequence 6 monsters. The yellow-robed priest hoarsely spat out a mouthful of black blood, sacrificing his own flesh and blood to feed the yellow robe, his withered palm seemingly stabilizing the connection with the temple. They want to destroy, to prevent the projection of the temple, but now I am using my master's artifact with all my might to hold them back. They can't get through for the moment. Su Qi said, temporary sounds very ominous. How long until the ritual can be destroyed? He looked at the red exclamation mark, the destruction countdown proceeding in an orderly fashion, now with only 2 hours left. I don't know. Su Qi, question mark. Furthermore, the yellow-robed priest looked at the surrounding ripples. They're calling all the pollution monsters, and the next wave will assault this place. You've got no good news, only a stream of bad? In any case, mortal. The yellow-robed priest rasped. All the strength I have left is spent summoning the temple's projection to counter the ritual. The rest I cannot care for. If you wish to survive unscathed, you must aid me. In this, there was no lie. It and Su Qi shared the same objective, and although it did not want to admit it at this moment, it needed the help of these mortals. Once I am freed, I will surely let you bask in the great master's radiant glory. This statement, Su Qi glanced above its head. Such grand promises, yet hollow. At this moment, the final home was also stirring. Countless abnormalities gazed in astonishment at the ground. An earthquake? The mist is still dissipating? No. The fog seems to be converging in one direction. Look over there. Someone cried out in surprise, looking towards the distance, the fog being drawn in and gathering towards one point, and the terrifying black fog vortex in the sky dome had expanded hundreds of times larger than before, and the mirage-like temple, bursting with incredible radiance. The twisted ripples began to expand from the city, swallowing everything around it. All the pollution monsters near the stronghold were howling madly, racing toward the twisted ripples. Their numbers, like a tidal wave, made everyone's scalp tingle. The abnormalities trembled. What on earth is happening? Like the end of the world. Boom, boom, boom. The temple's projection and the massive ritual collided with intense force, the terrifying sound creating waves of ripples. The players were now standing heavily atop the pit, looking towards the edges of the city. The twisted ripples expanded, sending a large number of pollution monsters into the city, though there was the yellow-robed divine preventing monsters that it couldn't handle, stalling. But the roars vaguely coming from all directions made everyone feel an extreme urgency. Chapter 245. The crowd held their weapons. Spiritual energy activated the ancient relics within their bodies. After the temple appeared, it temporarily isolated the black vortex from devouring the ground. At this moment, they could use spiritual energy and so on. No matter if it's to survive or for something else. We must give it our all. At this moment, numerous monsters, shaking their heads and flailing about, smashed their way out from the twisted ripples. Although the ripples were made more complex by the impact and most would get lost, it was evident that after exceeding a certain number, even a minimal chance would lead to the entry of numerous monsters. Actually, they understood nothing, couldn't judge directions, and only charged towards the center driven by their rampant monstrous instincts. Here they come. Kill! Many players growled as they burst forth with their strength, attacking the incoming monsters. The gap between the fighting power of ordinary players and top club players was clearly visible at this moment. Luna Fern also extended a multitude of phantom hands from behind, forming hand gestures in rows, sweeping through numerous monsters. Zero's berserk bursts of blood aura made his sword seem as if it became more aggressive, and he plunged into the tide of monsters. The tattooed youth's body was even flickering with tiny lights. Each tattoo could enhance his strength. The ghost-faced magician lifted his mask, and his entire appearance suddenly changed, filled with a terrifying evil presence, exploding with incredible might. Penelope Bloom and Justice Chief, though not matching the ghost-faced magician in bursting with power and traits, still showed combat abilities that justified their points. See that? Su Chi looked at the scene and softly said, "They have different styles, and at the same time represent different ancient relics, which often correlate with the power behind them. Evil, orderly, neutral. One can roughly discern it from these." Ethan Dawn, gasping for breath, suddenly cleaved a monster to death with his knife. Nonsense. Everyone was almost fighting to the death. And you just realized it now? Su Chi smiled. I'm just curious about the paradise we're about to enter. It seems the situation is indeed complex, with various powers entrenched and incompatible as fire and water. Is this really the freaking time for that? Ethan Dawn shouted, looking at Su Chi. I've been watching you for a long while now. You're slacking off, aren't you? Since the start, he had seen Su Chi rush into the monster horde and then come out with a dissatisfied expression. No, Su Chi paused. I am just trying to find a suitable attribute. Ethan Dawn? What's that? As soon as the battle began, Su Chi would randomly have one attribute, which continued until the battle ended. Of course, if he was not satisfied with the attribute, or if it was not applicable to the current situation, Su Chi could end the battle temporarily, and approximately 2 minutes later, the attribute would vanish. Right now, what Su Chi needed most was an AoE-type attribute. Right after Su Chi violently kicked a monster to death, a black shadow was suddenly absorbed into his body. What's this? Su Chi slightly faltered, looking at the new random attribute he had drawn. Darkness. Function. Each time an enemy is killed, their shadow will be devoured, and the more shadows devoured, the stronger the strength, the burst of skills, equipment effect, and trait potency. At the same time, As more shadows are devoured, extremely dangerous side effects will occur. Note: all effects of the dark attribute will be retained, but the chances of it reappearing upon refresh are extremely low. Su Qi's eyes paused for a moment. Dark attribute? It seemed very powerful. After all, the description outlined that it was a growth and devouring attribute, and even the effects could be retained, though he had to wait for the next refresh. And similarly, it was a double-edged sword with limitations. Extremely dangerous side effects. Su Qi faintly sensed the disordered monster's shadow enter his body, as if feeling nothing. It seems I haven't killed enough yet. Su Qi had no hesitation this time. Endless monsters kept stumbling out from the twisted ripples, their number and frenzy not to be underestimated. Boom, boom, boom. The explosive combat noises from numerous players were already incredibly chaotic and varied, adding to the ripples bursting from the sky dome. The terrifying and abnormal ripples sounded loud enough to pain the ears of all from Final Home, causing fear among the many players. But all were intercepted by the power of the yellow-robed priest's temple projection. Otherwise, it would have led to a collective obliteration of the players long ago. And now, Ethan Dawn was also furiously battling. His probe trait, although not able to erupt like others, still enabled him to slice through the disordered monsters. However, persistently fluctuating twisted ripples, endless disordered monsters, and not only that, a large number of 7th rank and 9th rank monsters were roaring as they entered the fray. The top players from elite clubs faced off against 7th rank monsters. Ordinary players teamed up to slay 8th rank. Damn! Another batch of monsters has surged in. There are 10 7th rank beasts. What should we do? Is anyone coming to deal with this? Penelope Bloom roared from afar. Hold them off for now. We're all tied up. Everyone was engaged in a furious battle, fighting with all their might. But the endless stream of increasingly powerful monsters was starting to push everyone to the brink of collapse. Ethan Dawn shouted commands. No casualties. Wait for backup. The players' faces turned pale. Easier said than done. How can we hold them back? All super rookies were embroiled in fierce combat. We can't hold them off. Ethan Dawn clenched his teeth, about to speak, when he suddenly felt a dangerous and eerie presence. Danger was behind him. Sweat dripped down his face as he drew his blade without hesitation and violently slashed behind him. But in the next instant, the blade was pinched between two fingers. Su Qi looked at the gleaming blade. It seems you've been coveting my points for quite some time. Ethan Dawn was stunned. How could it be Su Buxian? He had clearly sensed an abnormality, just like the aura of a pollution monster. And this guy actually stopped his slashing blade with just 2 fingers. Had he not exerted enough strength just now? Or did this guy possess the skill to catch a blade barehanded? But now was not the time for that. Here they come. Ethan Dawn listened to the roars and bursts of strength near his ear, and said with a jump in his eye, Step back carefully. They're charging over. Don't panic. Su Qi released his fingers, and his pupils were as dark as the night. The long sword in his hand was already stained with plenty of pollution monster blood, and the shadow behind him was thick, seemingly stretching far and deep. With a move of his body, he whipped up a fierce wind, and then he burst forth. Ethan Dawn's hair flew wild. His eyes widened. What the hell? He's just gone right through them. And those 8th and 7th rank monsters in his path were ripped viciously apart amidst a series of astonishing cold flashes. The other players around stared blankly at the flesh that flew in all directions. Damn it! Ethan Dawn's eyes bulged. Su Buxian, you're damn powerful. Playing possum? Huh! But Su Qi didn't stop, continuing the frenzied battle. He chose not to use any skills. This absorption ability of the dark attribute seemed to only work when he personally slew monsters, absorbing shadows within his immediate vicinity. At this moment, black shadows were quietly devoured, and his body gained another strange aura. The so-called side effect seems to be transferring the pollution over. The more accumulated shadows, the more crazily the pollution twists. Mused Su Qi, after devouring each shadow, roars and low growls echoed in his ears, but, all suppressed. His spiritual power was now far above that of ordinary players. There was a limit, but it was high. Moreover, the chances of refreshing the dark attribute had been stated to be exceedingly low. So Su Qi wanted to see just where the limit was this one time. At that moment, the yellow-robed priest at the center of the deep pit, looking up at the temple projection and the erupting ritual in the sky, was trembling. Why can't it be destroyed? I can hardly hold on anymore. Its body cracked inch by inch, revealing a grim smile. Indeed, as a trader, using the power of divine artifacts comes with a price. Chapter 246. Su Qi will end everything. Boom, boom, boom. The temple projection and the black fog vortex's massive ritual were colliding furiously. The entire ground was shaking, the city already in ruins, with frail buildings turning to dust under the terrible ripples one after another. And from the center of the deep pit, more and more enormous cracks were continuously splitting open. And the twisted exterior, the monstrous five-headed guardian was emitting a terrifying aura, with traits from within its body bursting forth with bizarre strength, tearing at the twisted ripples. The twisted ripples were already crazily pouring in various monsters, endlessly roaring. The sounds were deafening. At this moment, the players were trembling in their souls. They glanced towards the twisted ripples, and could vaguely discern numerous black figures appearing within. Hundreds of seventh-rank monsters were approaching. The heavy footsteps upon the ground, the roaring voices thundered. This scene had everybody trembling all over. This is practically the end of the world. There's no way to resist. The ghost-faced magicians and others had lost their previous excitement, each and every one involuntarily rising with boundless despair and fear from deep within their hearts. An unceasing stream of monsters, like a massive army, mad, bloodthirsty, throwing themselves forward without regard for their own lives. Such a terrifying tide of pollution monsters, coupled with the ongoing twists, it was mentally bizarre. The players' bodies and minds were on the edge of collapse. Every face was pale without a trace of color. Using their last ounce of strength, they fought desperately, praying that the presence in the center could resolve everything. And only Su Qi, he knew. The yellow-robed priest was also on the brink of collapse, because he now stood at the center of the deep pit. The yellow-robed priest was already on his last breath, kneeling on the ground, head bowed. The soul fire was burning out. The artifacts of the divine between his body and the projection of the temple, like aurora silk threads, were already starting to break apart one strand at a time. "It seems you're in a bad spot," Su Qi said to him, his voice gentle. The yellow-robed priest didn't lift his head, just bowed it even further, as if he was about to die completely, his hoarse voice slowly emerging from his throat. "It's about to end." At this moment, it resembled a pool of stagnant water. "The ritual is stronger than I imagined. I overestimated myself and underestimated fate. I can no longer see the future. If I say I can see it," spoke Su Qi softly. The yellow-robed priest lacked even the strength to scoff, sighing feebly. "This is reality. Those who harbor hope often reside at the very bottom, weak and insignificant, much like believers, always hoping for a miracle to descend, to save themselves. But in reality, it's nothing more than the impotence of ants." Su Qi, "No, the future I'm referring to is that everything will be destroyed in 10 minutes. The yellow-robed priest. Su Qi looked up at the deep red exclamation mark in the sky dome. The countdown was, from the beginning to the end, ticking down steadily, as if predicting the current situation, as if no matter what everyone did, no matter how much the yellow-robed priest exerted himself, it seemed doomed to end with destruction at the end of the countdown. If all factors had been maximized and the outcome still couldn't change, then one could naturally attribute it to the gears of fate and destiny. But Su Qi didn't see it that way. His voice continued to carry, "How much longer can you hold on?" "Less than a minute. You're fast." "Oh." The yellow-robed priest was momentarily taken aback, almost choking, but ultimately his voice was as dead as ashes. The cost of using divine artifacts is great in itself. Not only does it sip life force, but it also impacts both the mind and soul. My current state is already close to being worn out. To be able to exert its power, I'm already burning my soul. In that case, it seems I'll have to take over. The yellow-robed priest, as if hearing an outrageous joke, rasped, "Mortal, before I die, I also wanted to recall my life with somberness. Not like now," almost bursting out laughing. He lifted his head, and suddenly fell silent, his hollow eyes suddenly gaping wide. The Su Chi before him. His eyes were pitch black, like thick ink, and shadows cast upon the ground behind him revealed countless evil spirits struggling, roaring, trying to climb onto Su Chi, to drink his blood, to gnaw his flesh. The weirdness, the twist almost visibly flooding over. And Su Chi's breaths were as stable as he could keep them. Every vein was already extending black lines. He didn't know how this came to be, but at the moment, Su Chi was indeed reaching his limit. "What on earth are you?" The yellow-robed priest was stupefied, unable to believe what he was seeing in Su Chi. The horrific, twisted power had exceeded all norm, and it made even him feel uneasy. "Don't ask. If you ask, it's physical strength, a gift within me." Su Chi looked at him. "The last chance, you still won't seize it." The yellow-robed priest muttered, his mouth agape. Though he was a priest, he had never seen such a sight. He saw all the pollution seemingly concentrated within the body of the mortal before him, rushing like a tide. This twisted anomaly, if it were placed on anyone else, would immediately turn them into a terrible pollution monster. But not only did he suppress it, he was even just then able to chat so calmly with it. The yellow-robed priest was ultimately a person who did great things. He had already disassembled the artifact of the divine. That yellow robe, although it was a divine artifact, death brought into the grave was not as worthwhile as seizing the last bit of hope now, even if there was only a faint chance. Su Chi's pitch-black eyes were looking at the disassembling yellow robe that hovered in midair, emitting astounding fluctuations, the robe billowing, terrifying power stirring within the invisible ripples, connected to the Sky Dome Temple projection. Chapter 247. He had truly reached his limit at this moment. He had killed monsters and devoured shadows, reaching a staggering number. Around his ears, before his eyes, within the shadows, were terrifying screams and astounding, twisted pollutions, assaulting him like a tide. Although the spiritual eyes suppress it, even so, this has already exceeded the range that my spiritual power can control. And in this mighty, unknowable final ritual, filled with all sorts of pollution linked with the abyss and other extraordinary deadly dangers, he understood everything. Countless questions, dense information constantly filled his eyes. In a sense, what Su Chi-fan saw, he knew all. The final variable. I can only attribute it to the pollution power itself. Su Chi did not use his hands. He slowly spread his arms, the yellow robe clinging tightly to his body like a bone-deep tumor, the fierce wind whipping up instantaneously. Dust swirled around. Yellow-robed priest widened his eyes. This guy did not collapse directly. Divine power was circulating within, and any mortal who contacted it would be enough to make them fall apart in an instant, shattered. But at this moment Su Chi could still speak. He said, "This shitty yellow robe actually doesn't match my shoes." The yellow-robed priest, who was at his last gasp and had given out all his remaining power, would have jumped up and punched this mortal if he could. Su Chi slowly tried to reach out his arm, but it was immensely heavy. His arm could not stop trembling. It was as if an endless, immense pressure was there, which came from the extraordinary superior beings, the untouchable and terrible oppression of a real divine. The original true power of the yellow-robed priest was similar to that of a spirit king. Although he was now on the brink of destruction, panting for survival, Being able to use this divine artifact proved that this guy's previous remaining power was also very terrifying. Countless black, bizarre figures erupted in the shadows. Pollution was boiling. The wild wind did not stop, wanting to blow the whole city into fragments like trash. Return. Return. Sing. Disaster. Continuous whispers let Su Qi genuinely understand again the terrifying might of the divine. He saw visions. Endless darkness enveloped him, the yellow robe wildly expanding until it reached the sky dome. Floating in midair, countless dark shadows manifested. One side was the abyss's polluted sea. A large amount of foul black shadows wanted to devour Su Qi. One side was a bizarre pool of yellow robes. It twisted out countless colorful hues, with countless yellow robes appearing from all directions and numerous unsightly spiritual anomalies. Su Qi could not speak, could not see, could not touch. In this terrifying scene, he was just a barely noticeable speck of light, although it looked like he would be annihilated at any moment. But this speck of light was still faintly twinkling in the endless waves. Because he was complex. He was evil god's good brother. Also, the owner of the ancient god's heart, and the creditor of the master of destruction. In an instant, spiritual eyes opened. The ancient god's heart thundered. On his body was an inexplicable, strange fluctuation protecting him. All illusions at this moment shattered into pieces. Su Qi slowly opened his eyes, the yellow robe already dancing. The strange power making the yellow-robed priest tremble all over. This mortal actually, really held up? Under the disbelieving, stunned eyes of the yellow-robed priest, Su Qi slowly reached out his hand. The power of the yellow robe was being drawn out by him. The wild wind already burst forth. Countless distortions were surging. Then, Su Qi scratched his cheek. Sorry, the wind was a bit strong just now, and my face was a bit itchy. The expression on the yellow-robed priest's face froze in shock. Then, with the remaining power, he roared, "Don't waste time on meaningless things." Su Qi stretched out his hand toward the temple in the sky dome. Isn't it coming now? The temple's projection and yellow robe drew out twisted auroras. A mighty power burst forth directly towards the ritual. Simultaneously, he could feel his life force and spiritual power being torn apart. Whether it was strength or the mighty aura, all came from this garment, from the divine power. Su Qi was merely the one driving it to burst, the user, or the bearer. It was the same principle as the evil god's eye, only that one had all its power sealed, gradually revealing it with ascension. While the other possessed the prestige of the divine, even using it could only exert a little bit of power. There's a saying, external forces are ultimately just that. Relying on external forces, the power of others ultimately won't get you far. Su Qi looked at the yellow robe. Oh, I'm already wearing it. So no worries, it's all my own power now. The temple's projection was still erupting. Ripples intensified. Hundreds of 7th-rank monsters and guardians had already stepped into the city. Roaring with fear, they frantically rushed toward the center. Su Qi's face grew even paler. To use the forbidden power, indeed, mortals had to pay an unimaginable price. Every second felt like collapsing everything about oneself. But Su Qi's expression did not change, because he had already seen the future. This moment, boom! The temple's projection smashed the ritual. A vast vortex of black fog thundered. Visible countless distortions inside transforming into wild currents bursting. Numerous players watched in amazement at the incredible ritual patterns in the Sky Dome. Chapter 248. Countless pollution monsters were also fearfully screeching. The yellow-robed priest's last bit of energy dissipated, and his hoarse throat could only muster 3 words. Succeeded! Only Su Qi looked at the dark red exclamation mark. The countdown might have stopped, but the black fog vortex had not vanished. On the contrary, it was collapsing and emitting various kinds of strength, flying chaotically around everything. The ritual is destroyed, but why has the black fog vortex not dissipated? The yellow-robed priest said tremulously, "Mortal, it seems you understand nothing. The destruction pertained only to this world's insignificant ritual. The true entity is so immense that you cannot fathom it. Once it erupts, it will devour countless boundaries. So you're saying I just looked really cool, but actually, I just plucked a leg hair from a tiger? A peculiar metaphor, but that's the truth. This leg hair's destruction has allowed us to survive." Su Qi gazed at the black fog vortex. Could it really be like this? Countless worlds were enveloped by the ritual. Every world was plunged into despair, into a doomed conclusion, and even those wanting to destroy it were obstructed by pollution monsters and followers, guarding beside it. And endless waves of pollution monsters would continue to converge. This was the first time Su Qi felt the enormity and terror of the abyss power. Unimaginable. How dreadful the wars must have been in the true myths and epics, when the entire power of the abyss surged forth. From within he saw dark currents, very terrifying dark currents, as if they were about to sweep away everything, completely disrupting the present world. In this light, within the present world, numerous organizations were racing to pledge allegiance, develop, and cling to anything, all preparing for what's to come. Evil God bro, stop causing trouble, slow down. Can you wait for your brother? Su Qi let out a faint sigh. Now he understood as well. No wonder Paradise's strength was affected. It turns out it was not because of a divine garment, but because of this immense ritual. The temple's projection had already dissipated. The entire world, although still plagued with the black fog vortex's devastation, was at least not headed towards an annihilated end. What are you going to do? The yellow-robed priest watched as Su Qi moved. By then the temple's projection had disappeared, and the power of the yellow robes no longer held a terrible oppressive force, reaching a point where Su Qi could barely fight. Su Qi, before my temporary card expires, I will deal with the other monsters first. His figure vanished quickly. Yellow-robed priest? Why did it have a bad feeling that it wouldn't be able to retrieve its things? And at this moment, the tentacle man was moving with the ripples in the star chart, looking at the countless chaos. Although for unknown reasons I've been delayed, I've finally arrived. This time, I've spent all my spirit coins, hoping to keep the final home alive. After all, pollution is intensifying, and various pollution monsters are emerging incessantly. Though I don't know why 7th rank monsters are gathering in that hazardous area. But they could assault the final home at any moment. The tentacle man was deeply worried. It knew more than others about the horrors and fatalities within that old city, so it strictly forbade anyone from entering that area. And at that time, the tentacle man, looking at the star chart, finally saw his world twinkling faintly amidst the countless chaos. I've arrived. Its face showed joy, and amid the fluctuations of the ritual, covered by the twisted ripples, it was slowly transported in. It had been away for a month. Finally back to the home it longed for every day and night. Although this world was now covered with pollution, thoroughly shattered, it could still feel the warmth of home. After all, the most important people and the organization it founded were there. And the next moment, the tentacle man's body entered the ripples, finally entering this world. Ha! It was slightly astonished because the familiar fog did not appear, and the just-past ripples seemed a bit too forceful, entirely different from before. It opened its eyes a bit wider. Terrifying tempests in the sky, endless black fog vortexes, the ground cracking on a large scale. Everything was riddled with holes. It was like the end of the world. The tentacle man's initial joy froze on its face in an instant. Chapter 249. Instance ends and unease. Tentacle man's face was pallid as he frantically rushed on his way. Even though he was the creator and manager of Final Home, his mind was in complete disarray at this moment. Do not let anything happen. Please. The survival of a little character was already hard enough. Even with the backing of such an abnormal organization, they were merely struggling to survive, lingering in chaotic city, He had witnessed too many terrifying powers and beings. He had carried all the hopes on his shoulders alone, barely brought them back, but now it had turned into this mess. Tentacle Man clenched his teeth and ran wildly. He was very fast. His tentacles could extend significantly, hooking onto various trees and rocks. Leaping forward, Tentacle Man's strength was already at the peak of the 7th rank, just one step away from stepping into the 7th rank, but the various resources and spirit coins he needed were now unaffordable, considering they equated to an entire year of output from Final Home. For the survival of Final Home, he had no choice but to give up on Ascension. Damn! All the pollution monsters around have disappeared. What on earth happened? Tentacle Man gritted his teeth as he looked around. All the way here, he had seen a massive amount of shattered ground, terrifying cracks and a depressive gray formed by the swirling black fog in the sky dome. Although he had spent a large number of spirit coins through the ritual of Chaotic City, he was sent back to his own world, but the landing point was still a long distance away from Final Home. Tentacle Man could only rely on the compass in his hands, directing him towards Final Home, getting closer steadily. At this moment, the black fog vortex in the sky dome became calm, the mist thinning. Tentacle Man's body trembled slightly. He paused, looking into the distance. A city. This place is... He was naturally very familiar with this place. It was once where he had lived, and it had also become a dangerous area that was later unapproachable. Tentacle Man's heart tightened. What exactly was going on here? Why wasn't there the terrifying aura of before? The surrounding mist and ripples seemed to have dissipated too. He cautiously walked towards the city. The pervasive smell of blood caused Tentacle Man's complexion to change slightly, turning extremely solemn, readying for battle. He had already seen numerous disordered monster corpses and scattered flesh and blood. Something definite had happened here, and judging from the destruction level of this city, the force might be even more immense than imagined, with the black fog vortex positioned right in the center. As he gradually approached the city, the number of monster corpses was also increasing. Finally, Tentacle Man reached the position of the central street, took a deep breath, and cautiously poked out his head. Then, he saw a large crowd, densely packed, at least tens of thousands of people, jubilantly transporting pollution monster corpses onto carts or carrying them on their backs, one after another being transported out. Tentacle Man was somewhat stunned. Being the manager of Final Home, he could naturally recognize at a glance. All these were abnormalities, and they were all Final Home's abnormalities. Had they taken this place down? Damn! How could this be possible? He knew exactly what his people were capable of. This place was teeming with a large number of 7th rank monsters. His figure flickered slightly, appearing at the edge of a deep pit. The crowd of abnormalities suddenly paused, and on seeing Tentacle Man's figure, their expressions turned to shock and they hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Manager, sir, you're back," Tentacle Man asked in a grave voice. "What exactly is going on? Why are you all here?" An abnormality carefully said, "There was a task issued at Last House, requiring everyone to come here and transport these pollution monster corpses to the homeland." "Is it the Guardian?" "No, it was a strange young man. He planned the route, arranged the tasks, and even stipulated new expansion areas to be constructed. And it seemed like the Guardians were all following his commands." The abnormality spilled everything it had seen and heard. "Manager, sir. He also said he wants to lead our Final Home to grow bigger and stronger." Tentacle Man listened dumbfoundedly, his forehead inadvertently popping up a question mark. He had only been gone for a month. How had his home been stolen? Mortal! The yellow-robed priest now no longer had a body. Its physical body was already eroding, barely maintaining a trace of spiritual body, so could only attach to Su Chi. "Although I am grateful that you not only disrupted the ritual at the last moment, but also saved my life. But the divine artifact within contains depths you can't fathom." Su Chi looked at the ring on his finger. "Priest, I know you are anxious, but don't worry, you're now just a weak spiritual body. You can't use this item now. Let me keep it for the time being." The yellow-robed priest, Moreover, don't you still need my help? Su Qi looked at the yellow-robed priest. This is beneficial cooperation for both of us. The yellow-robed priest remained silent. It couldn't see through this mortal who not only could concentrate pollution within his body, activate divine artifacts, but also wanted to engage in deep trade with it, having lived for many years, yet it was restrained everywhere, unable to gain any advantage. Their cooperation was simple. The yellow-robed priest wanted to return to the temple, repair its spiritual body, and recover, while Su Qi needed its various information including high-value items like rituals. The rituals of Final Home, in the eyes of the yellow-robed priest, were rated as complete trash, trash among trash. But even such quality still cost Tentacle Man a great price to acquire. Chapter 250. I understand. The yellow-robed priest sighed softly. In any case, we are indeed bound together now. If you die, I naturally cannot escape either. Next, I will guide you to the temple, and can also offer advice when we encounter danger. No rush. Su Qi gently pushed the door open and entered the last house, calling into the darkness, "Little Ah Ling." The next moment, the scene before his eyes changed, and the doll-like body of Little Ah Ling appeared in his sight. She displayed a stiff smile. Although it looked scary, it was actually a genuine expression of happiness. As her voice came through, "Brother Su, you're back." People from the Final Home dragged back many corpses of pollution monsters. You and your companions are amazing. Su Qi patted her head and smiled. Where are those companions of mine? They're off completing quests everywhere. They really are benefactors of the Final Home. Not only did they kill so many monsters, but now they're not even resting. No problem. Let them be busy. After the ceremony in the Black Fog Vortex was disrupted, the Paradise system appeared again. Due to the disruption midway, the system now seemed somewhat different. Entirely different from the tone before. All players, pay attention. Due to unforeseen circumstances in this instance, we are collecting related data. The final main mission, audience, awaits its commencement. Players who have not obtained the right to an audience will be removed from the instance. Their overall performance will be evaluated, and they will receive ranked battle rewards. After the Paradise system information appeared, the instance was essentially declared over, and similarly, the journey of ranked battles for 99.99% of the players had also reached its endpoint. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the so-called audience to announce the final qualifications. At this moment, players were frantically completing quests. Firstly, to seize every moment to improve their ranked battle performance, and secondly, to earn spirit coins, as many people realized they probably did not have the so-called qualification for an audience. So before entering Paradise, they wanted to earn whatever they could. However, eventually all these things would flow into the Final Home, and now the Final Home say was all with Su Qi. Su Qi sat down next to Little Ah Ling. Priest brother, what do you think? The yellow-robed priest was taken aback. Think what? Wait. He looked at Little Ah Ling. There's something off about her. What's off about her? Her spiritual body is incomplete, and this body, the yellow-robed priest said in astonishment. How is she still alive? Explain more specifically. My spiritual body, although it's nearly worn away, is intact, while she has less than 1/10 of hers. Su Qi pondered. 1/10, what does that represent? The present world, a body of loathing. The yellow-robed priest uttered these words. It seems she died before. This kind of loss of the spiritual body can only occur in the dead. An existence yanked back from the death dimension will be loathed by the present world. Her life force will drain very quickly. This body is clearly patched together, already nearly rotting. Su Qi said, I understand the reasoning, but is there a solution? What if I replaced her body with a prosthetic? A prosthetic? Neuron-connected high-polymer active mechanical electronic products. The yellow-robed priest. I think I've heard of it. Su Qi paused slightly. Aren't you an old crony of a few thousand years? Even you have heard of this. The yellow-robed priest. Old doesn't mean technologically backward. Someone has reached the position of extraordinary divine in the realm of technology. However, the yellow-robed priest, though already transformed into a mark on a ring, seemed to still subtly shake, as if shaking his head. Even with the so-called prosthetic, it would not solve the problem. The death dimension is an untouchable taboo. Not even divine beings dare to meddle. The rule is the life and death of all things. Even with a mechanical body under this rule, life force would fade, rust, decay, and turn into scrap metal. The death dimension, another new piece of information. Su Qi's current understanding of everything was not extensive. The abyss and the present world already made up the macroscopic world map. But in reality, within countless epochs, there must be vast and turbulent various mysteries still waiting for Su Qi to unearth. And could the power of paradise be related to this death dimension? All right, I understand. The death dimension may be taboo, and divine beings may not dare to meddle, but not daring, and being unable is not the same thing, Su Qi mused. It seems only a being like a divine could have the ability to solve this completely. The yellow-robed priest said, "Who gave you the courage to say this as easily as if you were talking about eating and drinking? Not to mention, how could a mere mortal like you get a divine to deal with a taboo? The divine entities are all in slumber. You lack the qualifications to reach them. It's not a big deal." Su Qi looked at little Ah Ling. "Ah Ling, do you trust your brother, Su?" "I do." Little Ah Ling nodded her head. "Next, I'll help you exchange for a new body." Little Ah Ling's eyes were somewhat vacant. "A new body?" "Yes, although it can't completely solve your problem. At least you won't suffer as much as you do now with this uncomfortable, painful, and stiff body, and you'll look no different from a normal person. Changing to a prosthetic body would surely be more convenient and simpler than patching together monster flesh. Of course, I'm also asking for your opinion, and the new body will be the mechanical body that every child loves and dreams about," Su Qi said, his words filled with temptation. Little Ah Ling, surprisingly unmoved, muttered, "Brother Su, I prefer dolls." Heretic. However, even though little Ah Ling was a child, she was mature for her age and decided not to take Su Qi's words to heart. After some thought, she lifted her head resolutely, her stitched, bleeding cloth fists clenched. "If I can be like a normal person, Brother Su, I'm willing." Su Qi pinched her cheek. "All right then, leave the rest to me." At such a young age, the pain she endured was unimaginable to most. Tentacle Man was a father who deeply loved his daughter, but he was also selfish, even though he had given his all. "Of course, brother priest, you'll have to assist. Keep an eye on things for me." Yellow-robed priest. After all, this was Su Qi's first time doing something like this. It wasn't as simple as the folks from Night City make it seem, changing a prosthetic body as if it were a dental brace. But different versions have different strengths. Su Qi also needed to approach with caution. And in a sense, this instance was already at its end. While waiting for the so-called audience, it was also good to do something kind, to give Tentacle Man a surprise. To make him and Final Home feel more touched when they join the Hustlers sect. At the same time, in the vast Star River, someone slowly said, "It's coming." The anxious land, which has been silent for so long, the Temple of 10,000 Realms audience. Finally, the day of opening is approaching. Chaos Commerce, Gate of Formlessness, Divine Machinery Kingdom, Wanling Conference. All the super forces of each present world have set forth, heading towards the anxious land. They wish to witness the birth of a supernova of the new era. The 7 Spirit Kings. Their heirs are also involved. Naturally, they will mobilize to intimidate and protect, but after all, as the heirs of the Spirit Kings, few would dare to entertain the thought. This person snickered. Who knows? He caressed the totem stained with black fog on his body. Countless worlds swallowed, dark currents surging madly, Space at the end of the sequence is limited. Some people do not permit the new era to make its entrance, and there are certainly dangerous entities preying on these potential newcomers. Let's wait and see then, the ultimate node of the new era, to see what will happen. Meanwhile, in Paradise, Zone 9 Free City first sequence is also en route to the Anxious Land. A middle-aged man's form is hidden within the chaos ripples, surrounded by individuals exuding terrifying auras, all representing the pinnacle of power in Paradise. The largest scale, the longest silence, the moment of the last temple's opening. Out of all the promising newcomers, who will seize this final opportunity? Someone softly said, the nurturing, the resources poured in, the potential users born are far more numerous than before. And this time we have but one goal, and that is to protect all players qualified for the audience, all players who gain recognition from the temple, from the countless covetous and terrible forces, to ensure they leave unharmed. We've laid the groundwork for so long, and finally, the time has come, the middle-aged man softly said. Whether it was persuading various forces, contacting the Sunset Spirit King, or finding the traveling merchant, it was all for this critical moment. At the same time, in the present world, every world was suddenly illuminated by endless auroras. Someone looked into the chaos in the distance, the radiance spreading across the entire present world, speaking slowly, softly. The day of audience is upon us. Chapter 251 Audience begins. At this moment, many abnormalities were excitedly transporting a large number of monsters back to the final home. Tentacle Man, looking at the huge, plentiful pollution monster corpses, fell into a deep silence. Along the way, Tentacle Man had also learned about a series of events that had occurred over these days. A group of people suddenly appeared, under the leadership of a young man. They desperately completed tasks, exterminating all pollution monsters, and made outstanding contributions to the final home. An abnormality smiled. Manager, they are all very good people. Tentacle Man remained silent. He understood. The real focus was this young man. Who was he? Why was he doing this? To figure this out, Tentacle Man looked toward the distant, familiar final home, finally having arrived. Although the journey was rough, at least everything here seemed safe. It's the manager. You're back. Welcome home, manager. The eyes of many abnormalities lit up, each face showing expressions of respect and joy. Tentacle Man also nodded lightly. This time, I've brought back quite a few things that can help our final home survive. I will arrange and explain them shortly. But what's most important now is, when Tentacle Man reached the outside of the last house, he silently looked at the closed door, then reached out to push the door and entered. He needed to deal with his daughter's situation first. Just now, he had quietly collected some highly active flesh from among the many aberration corpses. And now, a month on, his daughter's body should be changed. Daughter! I'm back! But the dark hallway didn't produce any light, and there was no response from his daughter as in days past. Tentacle Man's heart suddenly tightened. Ah Ling? Are you there? Ah Ling? His voice grew louder and more frantic. Outside, he was a revered, calm manager. But when it came to his daughter, he would become utterly disordered. Ah Ling is already dead. A floating voice gently rang out. Tentacle Man stiffened, suddenly looking into the darkness. But he could see nothing. His voice trembled. Who are you? What are you saying? I said, Ah Ling is already dead. The calm voice enraged Tentacle Man, who suddenly roared, Bullshit! His tentacles burst out with terrifying strength, surpassing that of the 7th-rank monsters he had encountered before, and directly slammed towards the source of the voice. But only the sound of a wall shattering was heard, and he didn't hit anyone. That voice then slowly appeared from another direction. The body built from monster flesh has turned her into a monster that dares not leave the darkness, suffering both physically and mentally every second. If this is not death, what is it? Tentacle Man's body trembled, yet his eyes reddened. I see you're The outsider they talked about, the leader of that group. But whatever you have done, I just want to tell you, Ah Ling is none of your business. It has nothing to do with you. Give her back to me. Is that so? That voice sighed softly. I'm sorry, it actually does matter. Footsteps slowly echoed. Tentacle Man's body suddenly shook. He stared in disbelief at the person in front of him. I remember you promised to let go. Promised to let her rest. You promised to let go. A shadow appeared in the dim light, moving closer while softly speaking. But now it has turned into this situation. Your so-called redemption, fatherly love, is nothing but selfish, dark pity. Tentacle Man's body shook. No one in this world could accuse him, curse his selfishness, and he could ignore them all. But the person in front of him he could not refute. Because, whether it's the abnormal organization, or the revival of his own daughter, all hope stemmed from the person before him. Su Buxian. Tentacle Man trembled as he uttered the 3 words. His face pale. A mix of joy from meeting an old friend, yet also filled with guilt and various complex emotions. Why is it you? Su Qi silently watched him. The Tentacle Man before him, compared to 2 years ago, had lost the literacy temperament and gained a heaviness, mixed with a sense of burden. So, you've been behind everything, Tentacle Man said in a complex tone. Whether it was various mission orders in the final home or the transportation of polluted monster corpses, nothing would have been so easily achieved without his daughter's orders. If it was the person before him, then he understood. The intent to battle turned into a weak, humble posture. Tentacle Man had slowly knelt on the ground, his head drooping. What, you want to wipe the floor? Su Qi said softly. I know. Tentacle Man's voice trembled slightly. It's all my fault now. I'm obstinate, selfish, unable to let go. Whatever I need to pay, even if it's my life, I will give it to you. But now I want to see my daughter, Xia Ling. Please. Su Qi looked at him. This guy indeed hadn't changed, just as before. It was because of his daughter that the two had fully cooperated. Now it seemed the same scenario had occurred. It's somewhat familiar to see you kneeling. But sorry, I now can't let your daughter meet with you. Chapter 252. Tentacle Man's complexion changed slightly, his voice urgent. But little Ah Ling's condition has already reached a decaying stage. If we don't carry out the surgery to replace it soon, she will really die. Su Qi replied, Don't panic. I said no audience now. It's not a matter of life and death separation. After all, Su Qi paused. At this very moment, little Ah Ling is still charging and adapting to her new body. Tentacle Man suddenly widened his eyes. Ah Ling is fine? And, he stammered, there's also a new body? In 5 minutes, go see her in your research lab yourself. Of course, I'll give you a heads up not to get too happy too soon. Su Qi spoke gently. But Tentacle Man couldn't wait even 5 minutes and immediately rushed excitedly toward the research lab. Su Qi watched his departing figure, mumbling to himself. Sect Hierarch, what I just lectured him about was quite good. Remember to jot it down and include it in the epic biography of the Hustlers sect. Question mark. Yellow-robed priest. What the hell does a mortal like you need an epic biography for, and you're even ordering me to do such a thing? I'm a priest. Su Qi paused. Isn't a priest supposed to be a record keeper? Being under someone's roof meant enduring occasional nagging. It felt its spiritual body would be stimulated weaker sooner or later. It sighed lightly. Let's not talk about these pointless things. That abnormality has potential. Who? Tentacle Man? Right? Both his inherent sequence and what I've seen in the research lab, he possesses great talent. How about compared to me? Su Qi asked curiously. You? The yellow-robed priest hesitated, giving it serious thought. Hard to say. Since you come from that place called paradise, everything is an unknown, just like before. All were mortals, yet some were extraordinary. The yellow-robed priest was being cryptic. It seemed reluctant to mention past events, and this fellow also had valuable insights. Although under the roof, it didn't want to casually reveal them to himself. However, Su Qi did obtain some significant information. That was, in the era before, there were quite a few dangerous, powerful divine beings related to its power. Next, the situation also became straightforward. Upon seeing the prosthetic body, Tentacle Man cried tears of joy seeing little Ah Ling, who had become a normal person. Although he learned that the issue of her life force draining hadn't been solved yet, the current situation was indeed 100 times better than before. And the players at that moment also stopped their actions. Because system messages slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. Attention all players. The ranking battle elimination round has ended, currently judging and settling all players in the current instance. Players ranked 1,000 to 500 in each district will receive the potential award, 100 to 999 will receive the sequence award, 10 to 99 will receive the destiny award, and the top 10 will be graded according to their ranks. Lavish rewards at different levels. Note: apart from the above winners, all players participating in the ranking battle will receive a ranking battle gift package. The players were slightly startled. Now, did it mean the majority of the ranking battles had ended? After all, rewards were already being discussed. Moreover, this was the first time, even while players were still in the instance, settlements had already begun. Subsequently, new content popped up. Attention! Audience qualifications will now be confirmed. Audience qualifications. Each district will be judged based on the overall performance of all players, without the restriction of division standards. The number of people between districts may vary. Su Qi noted this. His gaze paused slightly. It means Paradise has set a general standard, which is fair but could mean fewer people from weaker districts qualifying for an audience, while stronger districts naturally have more people meeting this standard. The next moment, Su Qi watched as another message popped up. Congratulations player 985211, Su Buxian, on gaining audience qualifications. Please note, when the temple opens, only the chosen new era potential users will qualify to enter the Anxious Land for the audience. This is an opportunity countless lives dream of, as well as a chance to catch a breath amid endless tumults. All players who have gained audience qualifications, please take note. Proceed with caution and full commitment. The message is quite explicit: Anxious Land. Audience. Su Qi glanced over it. Anxious Land wasn't a new term. Previously, and Xinghe, Young Master Yuhai, and Young Master Ash had mentioned it, their ultimate destination being Anxious Land as well. To put it simply, this is like a present worldly unified exam. The exam ends, and the interview stage begins. Although they were of the younger generation and heirs of the Spirit Prince, they greatly valued the Anxious Land and considered the information they had received from the yellow-robed priest. Su Qi had known this all along. The players seemed to have already started teleporting away. I don't know how many will qualify in the fantasy district, but let's take this time to get things organized here first. Su Qi hadn't received his ranking award yet. It seemed to be stuck, but it wasn't the first time, and he didn't mind. Tentacle Man, stop doing backflips with your daughter and come here. Tentacle Man reluctantly halted, giving his smiling daughter a few instructions before hurrying over. What are my orders? ? Su Qi gave him a look. Is that something you, as the manager, should be asking, really thinking I'm the leader of the final home? Tentacle Man. Otherwise, he had already decided to follow this young man who always managed to work miracles after seeing how much the final home had changed under his command and considering the significant favors he owed. Then I'll reluctantly accept. Su Qi sighed. Yellow-robed priest. It had more or less figured out this man's shameless demeanor. Anyway, even though the hazardous areas nearby in this polluted world have been neutralized, the breakdown hasn't been resolved, new pollution monsters will keep being born, and black fog whirlpools will create various disturbances, bringing in many people from other worlds. So now we will officially start restructuring, transforming, and providing your organization's directives. Previously, Su Qi, using the dark attribute power of the yellow robe, had slain several guardians. It was the limit he could muster at the time. And following the shattered ritual, the remaining monsters of the 7th rank went on a rampage and fled. That's the nature of the polluted world. Not only are they unending, but pollution monsters also kill each other like nurturing goo in a cycle of ascension, eventually giving rise to all kinds of terrifying creatures. In such situations, one can only better oneself. Next, time was tight, tasks were heavy. The ritual of the final home had been transformed under the guidance of the yellow-robed priest. As for those items Tentacle Man had exchanged from Chaotic City, although the priest deemed them trash, they were all he could rely on to maximize their use currently. Final Home had now become a subordinate, abnormal organization of the hustlers. So, not only did they need to survive, they also needed a clear path to become stronger and advance. However, the timing was too rushed. There hadn't been time to explain. Suddenly, the sky in the Sky Dome changed. What happened? Tentacle Man, startled, looked up at the sky, where ripples like the aurora seemed to transcend everything and radiate into countless worlds of the present. And the emanating aura even caused countless people to tremble, involuntarily feeling a sense of submission, with many prostrating and shouting about a miracle. It started. The yellow-robed priest observed the scene. Mortal, are you sure you can enter using the power of paradise without my method? This method was simple. Besides being chosen, it implied other options like instigating the yellow robe to connect with the temple, or using well-connected contacts to create a passage to the outskirts of Anxious Land. Priest bro, it seems you don't have much faith in me. At this moment, the aurora's ripples, a grand aura swept in. Anxious Land unfolded. Countless people gazed at the scene, and at the same time, it was as if a pair of eyes that could see fate were also searching from the present world for those who were qualified enough. The aurora's blazing descent. Su Chi watched this scene. In this instance, it seemed that aside from him, no other players had attained the qualification for an audience. Shit, was the fantasy district that weak? No wonder Blowing Up Fish felt so good. And then, Tentacle Man suddenly muttered, "That?" He seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I was also hit by the light. Chapter 253. A New Strange Instance. Su Chi hadn't expected the yellow-robed priest to hit the nail on the head with a single phrase. Indeed, with his high discernment, he believed that Tentacle Man had potential, talent, and naturally, he couldn't simply be compared to ordinary abnormalities. However, it was apparent that the yellow-robed priest himself was quite puzzled. How has he also been chosen? Su Chi said, "If you hadn't said that, I would have praised you for your accurate judgment of character." The yellow-robed priest paused, then softly added, "That's because you don't know what Anxious Land truly is." Initially, the Divine built a massive temple together to collectively confront a place called the Abyss. Su Chi's expression shifted slightly. The yellow-robed priest noticed Su Chi's expression. "You don't know about the Abyss?" "That's right, as a mortal, you might find those two words too distant. It's the source of all pollution, a place of terror, danger, and deadly peril." Su Chi didn't contradict him, continuing to listen to the yellow-robed priest. "And the God's Palace is used to select those new generations with potential to enter, to become followers of a divine, and to be nurtured, even possibly receiving their legacy." The yellow-robed priest looked toward the auroras in the Sky Dome. The Eye of Destiny oversees the present world, gathering the power of all the divines, capable of observing everything. The ones chosen by it surely possess something extraordinary compared to ordinary humans in the present world. After he said this, Su Chi then understood. Tentacle Man managed to crawl through hardships within 2 years, creating Final Home. His research abilities, organizational skills, and growth were all parts of why he was chosen. At this very moment, Tentacle Man became panicky, quickly turning to Su Chi. "What should we do? I feel like my body is being pulled by some kind of force. Am I going to be transported away too?" "That's the way it seems. It looks like the construction and modification of the Final Home will have to be handed over to." Su Chi turned to look at the dazed Ah Ling. "Ah Ling, it's up to you now. I've left the Super Dream Protocol subsystem in your system. Just follow the instructions." Tentacle Man, feeling he was about to leave, hurriedly said, "Ah Ling, wait for me to return." But before he could finish, both he and Su Chi were swept up into the aurora and vanished. Little Ah Ling dazedly said, "Dad and brother Su have become light." Meanwhile, in countless other worlds, others were also bathed in the aurora. Various kinds of life had been chosen. Some were still at the Mount Tai altar, gazing at the stars in wonder. Some were clad in black war armor, resisting the invasion of a giant beast. Of course, many of the life forms bathed in the aurora were engaged in much more everyday activities. A certain detective in an apartment was playing the violin. A certain street artist was painting with the last of his paints. A certain famous singer was lip-syncing at a concert. The eye of destiny overlooking the present world. All those chosen possessed something special, including ordinary humans, many of them, among countless sequences, have at least one with a high degree of compatibility. Apart from the sequences that could be advanced by strength and combat, there were also many special talents. Just like the above, reasoning, painting, acting, etc., could all endow a sequence with extraordinary power. "The God's Palace has opened," someone softly said. "The selected beings of life have finally entered. The old age is still asleep, and the new age is about to be born from it. Who knows if the past divines foresaw that today? The force of the abyss is gnawing away at everything, more ferocious than before, and on a larger scale." Some people looked into the distance. All beings of high status seemed to silently await in the chaos. After all, when one has witnessed terror, they too shall bow before it. Not sure if it was an illusion, Su Chi always felt that being engulfed by the aurora and being shrouded in darkness in personal space felt the same. His consciousness slowly started to return. Opening his eyes, Su Chi was slightly stunned. What the? He saw. He was sitting in a chair in a dimly lit room. The faint lights around were flickering. The air was permeated with the smell of disinfectant. The furnishings in the room looked more like an office or a rest area, until Su Chi saw a white lab coat with blue and white stripes hanging in the distance, boldly marked with 9th Comprehensive Hospital. He then realized, so, it's a hospital. Su Chi pondered as he surveyed his surroundings. Then, from all the signs, I've deduced an important conclusion. This is not the so-called God's Palace. And Su Chi looked at himself. He was dressed in ordinary casual wear, and at the moment his body was just that of an ordinary person. Spiritual energy, strength seemed to have disappeared. The Paradise System hadn't popped up any messages. The night demon gene was not active either. The ring on his finger had also vanished, and with it, the yellow-robed priest, disappearing without a trace. Nothing responded. Everything's gone? Su Chi's eyebrows raised slightly as he looked toward the lab coat. Even though everything had disappeared, the question marks kept faithfully following him. Su Chi walked over and found something in the lab coat. First was a record book. The cover displayed Hospital Patient Observation Diary. He flipped through the notes. This is a diary I, as the chief physician, have written to observe the patient's conditions. The patient in room 1 suffers from severe lung disease, coughing violently every night. Even after changing to soundproof doors, the cough often carries into the corridor. Fortunately, the patient in room 2 is an elderly man with poor hearing suffering from severe dementia. He has been admitted for a long time with no children coming to visit, and has always been cared for by hospital workers. Chapter 254. Room 3 housed a little boy who loved to draw, but the things he drew were quite frightening. Some people saw that his room's walls were covered in red at night, but by the next day, it would disappear, likely an illusion. Room 5. Su Chi paused slightly. How did it jump directly to room 5? He looked closely. There seemed to be no record of room 4. That's not right. The pages seemed to have traces of being torn out. Su Chi silently noted down the details of room 4 and continued reading. Room 5. houses a highly educated patient with a mental disorder. His knowledge is extensive, often saying strange things and exhibiting bizarre behaviors. After interacting with him, I distinctly feel the fatigue on a mental level. It seems that the patient in room 5 has put a great deal of pressure on the attending doctor. Resentment can be felt between the lines. These are all the rooms on the top floor, all of which were under my care. As Dr. Doley. Su-Chi read the recorded text. It seems this is the private ward on the top floor, just 5 rooms. And there was one last sentence in the journal. Hey, new intern assistant. I have to leave today. Although it's your first day here, I'm leaving today's procedures in your hands. Of course, if you have any questions, just ask the caretaker, though that guy might be a bit peculiar. But remember, you are now the attending doctor. He can't afford any delay in patient care. Su-Chi nodded. It looked like the new intern assistant was himself. All right. How accurately you've seen me. How did you know I am a generation of divine doctor, especially good at treating diseases? Although, I'm not clear why I am here rather than the so-called anxious land or the god's palace. But since I'm here, I might as well make the ticket money worthwhile. Su-Chi held the journal in his hand and then donned a white lab coat. Inside the white lab coat, in addition to the journal, there was a room card and a stethoscope. The room card would allow him to enter other patient rooms. As he hung the stethoscope around his neck, the door outside was suddenly pushed open forcefully. A figure in light-colored uniform entered, a middle-aged man with slicked-back hair, who after looking at Su-Chi for a few seconds, he didn't seem surprised by the arrival of a new assistant, though they hadn't met before. The caretaker said gravely, "New intern assistant, what are you sitting around here for? It's time to make rounds." Su-Chi didn't move. "No rush. I have checked their conditions. They won't die anytime soon." Caretaker? ? Su-Chi closed the journal. "As the new assistant on the first day, I really don't know any of the procedures yet. Could you please explain them in detail?" No procedures were written in the journal. Although unaware of what exactly this hospital's situation was, Su-Chi felt it was probably fraught with dangers. Take the current room, for instance. Though empty, it seemed all the information was in this white lab coat. But in reality, the strong smell of disinfectant and the windowless walls bore various traces. And the last sentence written in the journal, it seemed to have been written a long while ago. In other words, that meant the patients and instructions were never changed, but only the assistants were frequently replaced. "How did I ever interview to get here?" mused Su-Chi. And more importantly, the caretaker before him, dressed in cleaning overalls with black boots, held a mop in hand, the splattered liquid unclear, but the question mark told Su-Chi that it was traces of blood. Yet at this moment the caretaker was not cooperative, his voice hoarse. "I can tell you, but at the same time, I need you to do something." Su-Chi, however, didn't immediately agree and said puzzledly, "But Dr. Doley instructed that now as the attending physician, I have the right to know all the procedures without needing additional tasks." The caretaker also faced Su-Chi. "If you want to know everything." Su-Chi looked at him. This person before him seemed to have vast information. So far he hadn't brushed up any questions related to the procedures, but rather, he just finished cleaning the lower floors of the hospital. He dislikes sunlight. He seems to have a low opinion of you. "I'm just an intern. What have I done to offend you?" "Okay. Then tell me what it is you need my help with." The orderly gently began. "It's a simple task. Just help me clean these items and put them back in the storage room." He pointed at his mop. "I'm tired now. I want to go back to the rest area and take a break." Su-Chi naturally knew that there must be danger involved, as anything worth getting comes at a cost. He smiled. "Okay, I agree." The orderly in front of him obviously wasn't dealing with a new intern assistant for the first time. His words were like those of an NPC, carrying a numb emotion. The orderly nodded calmly. "Then I'll now tell you the process. You'd better listen carefully. You need to check on 5 rooms, then probe their illnesses for today and, based on the conditions, get the relevant medications from the pharmacy on the first floor, and then find me, I will examine them and administer the medication. Also, pay attention to 3 things. The orderly looked at Su Qi. Do not tamper with hazardous items in the wards, do not mess up the medications, and also, do not linger too long outside this floor. Su Qi paused. Your cautions are very useful. It was as if nothing had been said. Aren't these all common sense? It also didn't say how long is considered too long. Storage room? Su Qi asked. The orderly calmly looked at Su Qi. On the 2nd floor. Find it yourself. I'm already too tired to talk anymore. He placed the mop by the door, then opened the opposite door and walked in. It seemed his resting room was right across. Su Qi watched silently as the door gently closed, bringing with it a squeaky, grating noise, but it wasn't noisy. It seemed to also be mindful of not disturbing other patients in the ward. For a moment, the entire office and the corridor fell into silence. It seems this hospital now is no longer managing to make ends meet, all the processes damned piled on one person. I can also understand why that guy named Dolly ran away. He picked up the mop, looked at it. It clearly had bloodstains, although washed it wasn't very clean. Su Qi was not in a hurry. He put it back. Now, the most important thing was to check the rooms. Su Qi walked into the hallway. The corridor was a straight long path without any windows, just as he had imagined. The only light source was a small lamp in the middle of the corridor. This kind of hospital, damned, uses a card to open the door. After not seeing any other information in the office, Su Qi took the card and put on a stethoscope. Dr. Buxian, ready to make the rounds. He walked about 10 steps and reached room 1. Generally, hospital room doors have a transparent glass space for observation, allowing doctors or nurses to know the condition of the patients inside without entering. But the glass on the door was covered with layer upon layer of newspapers, completely obscuring any view inside. And, although the door was tightly sealed, Su Qi could still hear the intense, continuous coughing from inside, as if trying to cough up the lungs entirely, very painful and quite ridiculous. This intensity, like an engine. It seems, all these patients in the wards are extremely ill. Su Qi took the room card, gently touched it to the door lock. Fortunately, I am a professional attending physician. He pushed open the loose door with a smile. Hello, the great Dr. Buxian, here to make the rounds. Chapter 255. 5. Divine. In room number 1, a dimly lit space, a man with a gloomy complexion was coughing madly. His eyes rimmed dark as if lined with eyeliner, as if he hadn't slept well. Cough, 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 cough. Cough. The violent coughing sounds shook Su Qi's ears even more. At the same time, Su Qi understood even more profoundly how severe the coughing was because with each cough, black blood kept spurting from his mouth. Boo. Cough, cough. Boo. Talk about being rhythmic. Even though he was coughing like that, he still raised his gloomy eyes. New here, aren't you supposed to examine me? Su Qi looked at the fresh blood coughed up from his mouth. Was there even a need for an examination? His gaze flashed slightly. The black blood dripped onto the floor, seeping through the cracks and not remaining in the room. Su Qi silently looked at his name tag. It displayed 2 characters, Black Fog. He smiled. Of course, I'll come and examine you right now. Su Qi stepped forward and picked up the stethoscope. This kind of thing, originating from the abyss, the first time he encountered it, was at the Master of Destruction's lair, where massive amounts of black fog swirled thickly, trapping the Master within. And now, it had appeared again, combining Anxious Land, God's Palace, suddenly transported to such a strange place. Su Qi had a rough idea of this man's identity. The moment the stethoscope touched the man's chest, Su Qi distinctly felt a strange low hum in his ears. His head fuzzed out for a moment, and all the scenes in front of him seemed to shift and reverse. The final scene landed on a dim little cabinet, a box with a strange pattern on the medicine box. It was just for a second. Su Qi's eyes cleared, and everything returned to normal. and the man in front of him, his gloomy eyes lifted slightly. "Do you know the medicine that can cure me?" Cough, cough, cough. He suddenly coughed violently, spraying a pool of black blood, but Su Qi deftly dodged it. Su Qi held the stethoscope in his hand, looking through his open clothes at the hollow, bloodied chest. He pretended not to see it and simply smiled gently. "Don't worry, my patient. I already have a general understanding of your condition. It's due to excessive kidney deficiency. Ah no, the slight cough and oral ulcers. Let me check the rest of the rooms first, then I'll attend to your issue." The gloomy man coughing up blood. Su Qi left room number 1 and then sequentially entered rooms 2 and 3. The old man in room 2, his white hair was vast, almost reaching the bedside, coupled with his thick white beard and tall nose bridge. He quite resembled a great magician with the surname Deng, except his eyes were lifeless, and he didn't move at all. "Old man." Su Qi waved his hand. The other's eyeballs didn't even move. "Old man, say something." "I'm your old friend Su Buxian. Do you know Su Buxian?" The other simply gave Su Qi a blank look, and his pupils slowly diffused back. Su Qi kept his hands in the pockets of his white coat, not rushing to use the stethoscope, but began to move his hands. "Old man, unlike Doli's Western medicine approach, I follow the traditional route, which is all about observation, hearing, questioning, and palpation." The old man didn't react to his movements. Su Qi slightly relaxed. Soon, Su Qi found a black nail behind his heavily haired head, dripping with black blood drop by drop to the floor, which also seeped through the cracks. Good grief! That depth! It's not called senile dementia anymore, but rather brain deficiency syndrome. Su Qi shook his head and sighed. Looks like Dr. Doli's license must have been purchased from a salted fish, quite unqualified. He placed the stethoscope on the old man's head. The next moment, he again saw a scene, a box containing another differently patterned medicine box. As for why such a nearly deadly injury needed medication, Su Qi wasn't surprised. Instead, he patted the old man on the shoulder. "Old man, stay here. I have to go." Room 3 had a boy. He appeared to be only 7 or 8 years old, but as soon as Su Qi stepped in, he knew what was wrong. His eyes had been cruelly gouged out, with black blood continuously flowing from them. The little boy was calmly holding a pen, soaked with that black blood, drawing and writing on a drawing board. Su Qi took a glance. They were all kinds of myths, demons, and other strange creatures, each looking as if it might leap to life. However, the black blood slowly disappeared from the drawing board, leaving only traces of plain paint. The sensation of them leaping out seemed to have been completely consumed. "Aren't you scared seeing me like this?" The little boy's faint voice came as he lifted his head to look at Su Qi with those bloodied, hollow eyes. "I just feel." Su Qi sighed. "Your parents are a bit too much." At such a young age, making drawings so lifelike, how many training classes must your parents have signed you up for? The little boy. "Also, I have a good understanding of painting. May I give it a try?" Su Qi smiled. "Painting? Understanding?" The little boy hesitated slightly but did not reply and passed the paintbrush and drawing board over, indicating that he could try. Su Qi picked up the brush but didn't touch the ordinary paint. Instead, he dipped the brush in the black blood flowing from the boy's eyeballs. Then, he left a cartoon panda face on the drawing board. Chapter 256. The little boy. He said in a deep voice, "You call this a drawing? Are you joking with me? This is postmodern art, minimalist lines that can evoke a spirit and visual sense that thick and rich colors could never capture." Su Qi talked confidently, easily spouting a great deal of theory. Clearly, the little boy was serious about painting. It was as if a wave of contaminated theory had crashed into his head. "All right, the checkup is over, little friend. Remember to take care of yourself and study hard." Su Qi retracted his stethoscope and headed out. Although it was only the third room, Su Qi was already handling it with ease, and he had almost completely figured out what was happening here and inferred the identities of the several people in the room. Anyone who still considers them mere abnormalities is a fool. Su Qi. Each one of them is related to the divine, or rather, they themselves are divine beings. He wasn't just some ordinary assistant, nor was he inexperienced. From various clues and the information provided by the questions, Su Qi could boldly guess their identities. The black blood flowing from each one of them is the power of the abyss's black fog. The so-called illness is debatable, but it's also likely they are the severe wounds they once received in great battles. And the patterns on the 3 medicine boxes, they're not simple either. Likely each is their respective totem, each one representing a divine being. If they are divine beings, to think that all 5 of them are all locked up in such a bizarre hospital. There are many different versions of the legends in the present world. In the mythological epics of the universal battle, countless divine beings and the abyss burst into terrifying combat, numerous worlds destroyed. A great many divine beings, powerful believers, and mighty beings fell, slept, or were sealed into the ancient battlefield. It seemed he had entered into an extraordinary place. However, although he had a general judgment and guess, the ensuing questions became even more numerous. Was the appearance of the intern assistant meant to treat their wounds? Or perhaps to rescue them from this place? But so far, it didn't seem like he had succeeded. And who was Dr. Doley? And the caretaker? Why did he ask him to help put things away? Room number 4. Su Qi glanced at it briefly. It didn't give him a good feeling, and the record book had no content about the patient inside. Instead of entering in order, he chose door number 5. As soon as he entered, someone suddenly lunged at him with force. Su Qi didn't hesitate to kick out, sending the person flying. From the above 3 cases, it seemed that these divine beings didn't possess great strength here. Instead, they were as weak as ordinary people. Ouch! It hurts so bad, the person exclaimed after crashing hard onto the floor. The person before him, with somewhat disheveled brown hair, wearing thick black-framed glasses, rolled around holding his head in agony, but suddenly stopped and revealed a maniacal smile. Ah ha ha ha. Just kidding. Although it really hurts. But that was a nice kick. Su Qi had a ready retort. Of course, it's from playing soccer. The person turned his head, but hesitated for a moment, because Su Qi was now reclining on his bed, stretching out his hand to flip through the books on a nearby shelf. Being and Time, Metaphysics, Being and Nihility. I thought you might be curable of mental illness, but now it seems, reading so much philosophy, you really are beyond help. It's my spiritual nourishment, and I'm certainly not mentally ill. The person before him licked his lips and actually showed a polite smile, although it was stiff and his face continued to twitch, veins pulsating. However, forgive my earlier rudeness, it was just seeing a new assistant. I was too excited to have someone to exchange thoughts with who has not been polluted by knowledge. Su Qi. So you're saying you're very knowledgeable? In my head, there's too much knowledge. Every minute and second I must think intensely, or it will bring me unbearable pain. His eyes showed madness. I know you want to examine me, but, sorry, you can only leave here if you satisfy me. Su Qi looked at the person in front of him. The person before him wasn't just nominally insane. He was like a mad sage of wisdom. The question mark even directly displayed the identity of the other party. God of knowledge. This piece of information was equivalent to hammering home Su Qi's previous judgments. Everyone in the 5 rooms was divine and had suffered unimaginable severe afflictions, including the person before him. Thick black fog seeped from all 7 of his orifices, as if everything within his brain had been thoroughly polluted, eroded, and possessed an unbearable pain. All over the wall were impact marks. It seemed, as he had said, that being unable to communicate would plunge him into horrific torture. No wonder Dr. Doley felt mentally tormented every time after his examinations. Satisfied, Su Qi closed the philosophy book. For instance, inquire about all the knowledge you have come into contact with in your past. Thinking will alleviate my pain. Of course, I will only give you 10 chances, and if you can't manage it, you'll remain here forever. He pushed his glasses up and revealed a manic smile. But rest assured, I won't harm you. I'll just infuse you with my knowledge until your mind collapses. Su Chi merely glanced at him coolly. All right, the first question. When I was 8 years old, I flung a stone at the headmaster's office window for the first time. What was the trajectory model of the stone then? The question calmed the man down from his mania, as he stared at Su Chi, seemingly deep in thought. And indeed, thinking did seem to lessen his pain somewhat. Time ticked away slowly. The man was staring at Su Chi and pondering. But Su Chi was also observing the information above his head. Traces. He's capturing countless ancient yet existing lines within numerous traces and analyzing them, reasoning backward. After about 5 minutes, the man slowly started to speak with a smile. I know now. He actually knelt on the ground, excitedly scratching out the model with his fingers. See, it's like this. This is my knowledge. Yet, Su Chi did not show any sign of surprise. Instead, he applauded and nodded with satisfaction. Congratulations, you answered correctly. It's indeed the same as my calculations then. The man pushed his glasses up and stared at Su Chi with an even more appreciative manic smile. You're not an ordinary guy. With others, I could reverse engineer everything about them in just a second, but you, such a minor matter from your childhood. Yet it took me so much time to think. This is too interesting. Su Chi smiled. The interesting part is yet to come. Amid the man's excited and agitated state, Su Chi proceeded to ask the subsequent questions. Among them were contradictory philosophical inquiries and classic bar jokes. The man's excitement gradually cooled. It wasn't that he couldn't answer, but he realized these questions were dull. You had just piqued my interest, and now you ask these stupid, petty questions. The man's face could not help but twitch. Now there are only 2 questions left. Su Chi smiled lightly. That's enough. I've almost understood all I need from before. This guy was not omniscient or omnipotent. In fact, he needed his own knowledge, which implied there must be traces. He discovered the cause and effect from countless intricate traces by profiling and reasoning backward. That was even a notch above the butterfly effect. And all the classic paradoxes couldn't stump him either. After all, he was divine. Su Chi pondered. Then I shall ask my last 2 questions. The first question. What is in my eyes? The second question. How should I kill it? These 2 questions were one Su Chi had prepared long ago. The man's previous words actually had a trap, the premise being that he needed knowledge that he had personally come into contact with in the past. The key was contact. This was also why he could deduce through traces, typically speaking, boasting or intentionally discussing high-concept, virtual existences would only waste the number of questions available. But unfortunately for him, he had come into contact with all of them. Chapter 257. Awakening. The man was slightly startled. He wasn't because Su Chi's questions were too difficult. Quite the opposite. They were actually too simple compared to before. His brows furrowed in displeasure, and his eyes looked at Su Chi with some confusion. These 2 questions, are you sure? Su Chi paused. It seems you are pretty confident. I can sidescrape along any trivial trace of the past timelines through reverse deduction. The older, the traces tend to be slighter. The man explained patiently and calmly. After answering the previous 8 questions, his symptoms of madness and pain had significantly reduced. Indeed, thinking could alleviate the erosion and mixed pollution of his brain. And yet, your questions are about the present moment. Far too simple, even. He shook his head. Somewhat disappointing to me. I'm considering whether to give you a chance to change your questions. The man's face showed a calm and peculiar expression. After all, the previous ones had me somewhat expectant. But thinking it over, letting you stay here forever is also not a bad choice. If that's so. Su Chi paused. Then how about adding a little more weight to the challenge? That can be done. The man said calmly, I want to study your soul. You are different from other ordinary assistants. There must be something special about you. naturally. Of course, this also means dissecting and analyzing your entire soul, with the best outcome being ending up an idiot. Su Qi, feeling the heat of the other's gaze, remained unperturbed. What if you can't answer? You can take one item of value, as you see it, from this room and leave. Su Qi was aware of the existence of the 5 rooms, all divine. Though they seemed ordinary, the items within those rooms likely held extraordinary value. The reason he hadn't helped himself to those was because of the caretaker and the so-called Dr. Dolly. It was crucial to understand the purpose of their existence. It appeared that they were there to clear away things derived from the black fog. His every move could hardly escape their notice. So as long as he adhered to the principle of voluntariness, Su Qi felt he could score some decent spoils. A good proposal, Su Qi said. Do I need to count down from 3, 2, 1, and provide you with 3 lifelines? This isn't some quiz show. The man's glasses flickered slightly. I can know everything about you. The next moment, his pupils became extremely deep, just like when he was answering questions before. He could see all the surrounding traces, a massive, terrifying density of them appearing around his line of sight. If one were to draw a comparison, these traces were like countless, dense, frenziedly spinning data. Even a pencil dropped on the ground, containing all its cyclical past traces, would be enough to burn through all the hard drives in the ordinary world. Even the man, as a divine being with an extraordinary sequence, had to exhaust all his power and spend a lot of time and energy to trace them back. Therefore, usually he would first select a target, and during the reversal, he would ignore all other distracting traces. This would allow him a respite from the constant envelopment of endless traces and the brain assault by endless data, relieving him slightly from the agony akin to suffocation in the deep sea. This is why his thinking could ease his pain, and the next moment, the man looked directly at Su Qi, making eye contact. The countless surrounding traces were weakened, and the extensive data was blocked from his senses, mitigating his pain. Regrettably, he didn't think this relief would last long, because, retracing from his own extended traces, he had already discerned quite a few things. This cluster of traces was his own reflection. This cluster of traces was the reflection of the room. Other clusters of traces also showed the reflections of a few old friends. And then, whose traces are these? Why so strange? Let's take a closer look. The man was about to trace back further, eager to find out more. A massive amount of traces circulated in his brain, and as a divine being with a terrifying analytical capacity, he could almost know all knowledge. This is also why spiritual power is extremely important, because only through the sequence pathways related to spiritual power could one become an old trace master. Almost all divines competed to cultivate such beings. Traces were overlooked at a rate hundreds of times faster than before, yet the man still couldn't trace them back. What was going on? What exactly was this? Why were there still such vast traces? It seemed a shape was forming. Wait, it's another reflection. In that instant, the overwhelming traces suddenly made the man shiver all over. The terrifying data spiked his headache by dozens of times in a moment. His facial expression twisted. His pain was maximum. A screech stuck in his throat. How could it? Who is this? Why? Can't capture. Have traced back. Must avoid. Otherwise, his own injuries might get directly exacerbated. The man's face turned slightly pale. Though he had been sealed here, suffering erosion and grave injuries, he was still a divine being. To end up like this, he decided to first avoid it. At this time, the man noticed a strange trace, quite different from the others. It just stayed quietly in its place and didn't form a data cluster with other traces. He slightly furrowed his brow, just about to explore. Chapter 258. Countless traces suddenly burst forth around him, as if a galaxy had exploded. Boom! 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 Innumerable traces, like a nuclear bomb, suddenly annihilated everything inside his head. Infinite, endless, numerous, terrifying, dense traces, They almost instantly submerged everything about him. The man fell to his knees, clutching his head, screaming in extreme agony and terror. He was weeping uncontrollably, with blood streaming from his eyes. The veins on his face were about to explode. "What is that? What is that? What is that?" Su Chi's eyelids twitched as he watched the man almost descend into madness. Fear, muttering the same sentence over and over like a broken toy. Such a big reaction? Su Chi thought the spiritual eyes contained the sealing power of the evil god, and since the evil god could manipulate the abyss to knead the present world like a crumpled paper ball, it must be extraordinary. Moreover, the most important point was that the use of the spiritual eyes was unrestricted, indicating a higher rank, something the man in front of him naturally couldn't see. But such an intense reaction, even like going mad, this was somewhat unexpected to Su Chi. Though the evil god was awesome, you're still divine, and even if not an opponent, you wouldn't be like an ordinary person who would go deaf and blind just by seeing it, falling into a state of spiritual insanity. Could it be? Su Chi silently observed the question and exclamation marks around him and gradually withdrew his thoughts. To bring the man back from madness and trembling, Su Chi employed the method of philosophical infusion. That is, whacking his head hard with the thick philosophy book by his side. Thump, thump, thump. Don't say. It was actually quite effective. The man seemed to be smacked silly, and his shaking, frenzied appearance showed signs of recovery. Continue. Su Chi, holding a heavy book, did not hesitate to whack him again. Divine artifacts, even a book that looks ordinary holds extraordinary power. And Su Chi also noticed from the question marks that the man often used the book to hit his own head, seemingly using this method to alleviate pain normally. This is the power of knowledge. About a minute later, the man slowly regained his senses, touched the blood on his head, and asked in confusion, "What just happened?" "You accidentally stumbled and hit your head on the foot of the bed." Su Chi shook his head. "Be more careful next time." The man? Wait. The man suddenly paused. "My head doesn't hurt anymore." He felt that, apart from the physical pain on his head, the infinite traces like spiritual spikes of annihilation pain were gone. Su Chi nodded. "It seems that my treatment as a master gynecologist was very effective." "Let me recall for a moment. Just now I seem to have." The man tried to remember but suddenly broke out in a cold sweat, as if an ant had fallen into the sun. He quickly stopped and gasped for breath. "What's wrong?" Su Chi feigned confusion. "I don't know." The man looked at Su Chi, a bit astonished. "And why? I could see your traces before, but now I can't see anything." Su Chi said, "It's because I have completely washed away all pretense. But let's not talk about that. Have you answered my question just now?" The man's face turned slightly pale. "Answer? What the hell?" He had almost forgotten what the question was. "I lost." The man's voice trembled slightly as he exhaled. "You choose." Su Chi gently picked up a book. "Well, then I won't be polite and this book will be mine." This was the most valuable thing in the room. The power and weight of knowledge indeed have no equal. However, it looks like I have cured your illness. Su Chi paused. "I'm going to charge separately for this. Do you have anything that can compensate?" The man did not respond, but lowered his head, took off his glasses, and without the spiritual impact, he now returned to a semblance of normalcy, no longer showing signs of madness. The man had somewhat regained a scholarly, wise demeanor, yet he spoke in a low voice. "Invisible traces quietly connect into a network. Some people call it destiny. If you can control it, you can even see the future as if it's inevitable, with no accidents for anyone. And you are extremely special. I can't see any traces on you anymore. You don't exist in destiny." The man suddenly looked up at Su Chi, making Su Chi slightly lift his foot, thinking the man might pounce. But he showed an extremely excited expression, like a descent fanatic discovering the three body people at his doorstep. His hoarse voice said, You are a person not controlled by fate. I beg you, you must stay alive, grow, and reach the future.
Sui.
Even if you didn't ask, I don't seem to have any reason to refuse. And what does this have to do with not being controlled by fate? An existence without traces signifies not being controlled by fate. But why was the man so agitated? The man shook his head. All I can say is one thing. Remember, don't let anyone else discover this secret. Otherwise, those terrifying beings that the gods are dealing with, the abyss behind that dreadful god, will go to any lengths to kill you. Oh? That's a bit too late to tell me, brother. But rest assured, I will do everything to erase all traces. After the recovery from the deep slumber, I will do everything to protect your growth. Even if your talents are poor, I will at least get you to enter sequence 2, or even sequence 1. Su Qi's eyelids twitched slightly. This was a solemn promise from a divine being. Chapter 259. Sequence 1 and Sequence 2 were realms countless people had cracked their heads over but could never enter. Likewise, those who reached this realm were all terrifying entities far beyond the reach of myriad people. Su Qi. Since that's the case, I'll take a bit more stuff with me. The man watched as Su Qi tried to move the cabinet and fell silent. This was an existence not controlled by fate. Indeed, every step had surpassed his expectations. Yet he shook his head. The other things are useless. Leaving here, they would turn into ordinary objects and lose their strength. But that book, it contains most of my knowledge and won't become like the other items. Because strength will be restricted, the man said seriously but sternly. But knowledge won't. Su Qi looked at the man. All right, so next I need to fetch medicine for other patients. Is there a route for that? The man shook his head. Sorry. The answer to that question isn't with me. And currently, you are too weak. I shouldn't interfere too much. Only when you become strong yourself can you struggle out from the depths. Su Qi walked out from room number 5. The door closed tightly behind him. In the quiet corridor, Su Qi slowly made his way toward the stairs. The man's caution made Su Qi ponder. He seemed to have been unilaterally considered the child of hope. Was all this related to the evil god or to his own special abilities? Su Qi was still unsure. It's so dark. Su Qi looked at the stairwell. Isn't there a light? The next moment, he stepped forward and his whole body suddenly plummeted. Suddenly, Su Qi opened his eyes. Brother Su. Su Buxian. Sect Hierarch. Tentacle Man waved his hands, calling out hurriedly. I've been calling you for ages. Why didn't you respond? Su Qi paused slightly. Only then did he realize he had left that bizarre hospital. And he, along with myriad others, had landed in a vast square, with brilliance shining near the sky dome. He could also see temples gleaming in the distance. What's going on now? I'm not sure either. I opened my eyes and found myself here, and it looks like other people were also transported here from various worlds. Everyone's faces were blank at the moment. Well then, had he just been whisked here by the aurora ripples when he meant to fetch medicine? Su Qi's eyebrows wrinkled slightly. Letting him go fetch medicine to treat illness? Yet back to reality again? And what exactly was that man who seemed to hold a high position even among the divines? Look, what is that? Tentacle Man pointed into the distance. Among countless temples, there were 9 majestic divine statues, emitting a grand and imposing aura amidst the brilliance. But all were shrouded in brilliance with mist rising, unclear. The yellow-robed priest slowly spoke. That's the creator of Anxious Land, the leader of the divines, representing the supreme will at the center. You can see it, this aura. It's coming at us even from an extremely distant place. Su Qi looked around. And also, didn't expect so many people. There were about 10,000 people on the floating square they were on. And around them, there were thousands more floating squares, with people variously excited or fearfully kneeling on the ground. Amit Ba Buddha. Amen. May Yuan Men protect. Hallelujah. God, help me succeed in making it ashore. Some ambitions. Still thinking of making it ashore even here. Get out. This is a selection facing the entire present world. The yellow-robed priest said, and the competition will be very fierce. So without me, it'd be hard for you to stand out. Su Chi paused. Then I really will have to rely on you this time, Brother Huang. At that moment, brilliant lights from the central divine statues connected to the many floating squares. The yellow-robed priest said solemnly, now all of you will go to have an audience with the gods. Chapter 260 Enter. God's temple group, God's palace, stood tall in the magnificent distant skies, faint and elusive, shimmering in and out of sight, its various radiances making it incredibly splendid. Countless people gazed upon this scene, and that rainbow-like bridge, their eyes reflecting the brilliance, twinkling with devout light. Dang, dang, dang. At this very moment, there suddenly rang out a bell, imbued with dignity, loftiness, and solemnity. Its sound instantly reached the ears of countless people. What is that? The huge, mountainous ancient bell was at the center of the god's palace. It seemed as if a figure was ringing it. Su Chi looked at this scene. Who is that? The yellow-robed priest reacted strangely. Seemingly guilty, murmured softly, Bellringer. Could he still be alive? That shouldn't be. Su Chi. Are you afraid of him? Afraid? What a joke. The yellow-robed priest coughed. I am a priest of the yellow-robed master. I've seen more of the world than many. This was a lie. Su Chi didn't expose him. The yellow-robed priest was not entirely honest and had hidden many things. What is the identity of this bell-ringer? Is he divine? The yellow-robed priest said gravely. No, he is one of the proxies elected by the god's palace. Among the many powers of the god's palace, he presides over summoning. When the deities march into the ancient battlefield to wage war, he can summon countless boundaries. Whether to deliver commands or to bestow strength and support, he plays an extraordinary role. Su Chi nodded. The god's palace was established by many deities in unison. To oppose the abyss, a vast alliance that assembles various followers, new power of faith. And the deities are hands-off managers, who do not interact with mortals or meddle in lower affairs. At this time, all lives revere and seek an audience. A majestic, solemn voice accompanied by the heavy sound of the ancient bell arose beside everyone's ears, shaking their souls and involuntarily leading them to devout prayer. Tentacle Man murmured, Now, are we going to have an audience with the divine? One could only say, the promotional material did not quite match the content. Su Chi looked over. It seemed that the audience was supposed to be with the effigies of the gods, for the leadership of the god's palace had long since fallen into slumber, perished, sealed, or been restrained in places unknown. And the one most reactive was the yellow-robed priest. Bad. The yellow-robed priest trembled. It's really bad. Could he actually be alive? A few seconds ago, someone was saying they were afraid of nothing, claiming to be a priest of the yellow-robed master, saying they would have slapped that bell-ringer. The yellow-robed priest roared, Spreading rumors, huh? I damn well never said that. It was about the same meaning. Su Chi paused for a moment. But why are you afraid? Is there a grudge? Did you steal his delivery food before? The yellow-robed priest said sternly, Knowing too much isn't good for you. He said solemnly, Anyway, you first follow the group, and then at the right time, listen to my command and act accordingly. Su Chi gave him a glance, his thoughts active. Known to him, this fellow is a three-surname servant, having served as a priest under three deities, those beings being the evil god, God Gerba, and the yellow-robed master, also no small figures among the divine. It's hard to say. If he had served other deities, in any case, this guy surely hid many secrets. However, it doesn't matter. Sooner or later, he would uncover the bottom of this guy's story. Tentacle Man was also somewhat excited at this moment, looking at the people already ascending the Rainbow Bridge. Should we go too? Let's go. Su Chi looked around. There were no players among the people around. No other acquaintances, huh? Nonsense, having acquaintances would be an extremely small probability, after all. In the vast expanses of the present world, to be selected from within is like randomly picking 2 grains of sand from the countless planets of a galaxy. The yellow-robed priest said calmly. Of course, this only applies to the ordinary people who were selected. How so? The yellow-robed priest. Apart from some who have very high potential in the present world, others are people brought up by major forces, by high-ranking existences. There are backdoors? The eye of destiny doesn't care. Nonsense. The yellow-robed priest coughed. Above is the eye of destiny, and below, there are channels and strategies. When the temple opened before, the paths were monitored by the priests and strictly controlled. Of course, many priests would accept huge bribes and quietly let a lot of people join the audience. Su Chi said calmly, "This sounds eerily familiar. Before coming here, Su Chi had exchanged quite a bit with the yellow-robed priest. In its era, the war between the Abyss Camp and the current World Camp lasted for hundreds of years, and the audience of the God's Palace was actually open to cultivate new forces to oppose the endless Abyss. There was almost one every year back then. Those selected to participate in the audience would have the chance to seize the power of the temple, naturally derived from the divine. A single ladle from this vast ocean could transform many from struggling lower-class survivors into powerful leaders. Even then, there emerged numerous epic figures who opposed the Abyss and whose tales are still recounted to this day. Of course, this is the version previously recounted by the yellow-robed priest. Now the version has changed again. It pondered to itself, the resources of the temple are limited and precious, and the deities are hands-off, always at war. By the Middle Period, a time came when the God's Palace was almost completely corrupted, with even 50% or more of the temple's resources being monopolized by major forces.